And here we go now. Here we go now. Here we go now. Give it away now. Hey guys, how you doing today? We are set up and we are ready to go. Streaming. We've done it. I would like to begin today's stream with a general apology. I think yesterday's stream sucked. I think it sucked. I was very disappointed. I ended the stream and I felt disappointed. I felt disappointed with myself. I felt like I let people down. I felt like I wasn't delivering a good product. And I think it really came down to, DJ, good to see you, my man. I think it came down to just like, I let my frustration and my expectation get me carried away. Schizo Poster, good to see you, my man. That, yeah, capitalism messing with your head. I mean, look, at the end of the day, here's the thing, grinning, right? Is that I have to be better. It's as simple as that. Like, people are going to be in here acting like Nazis and insulting me and doing all that kind of stuff, and I know that's true, right? I know that's true. It's how it's going to go, right? And I just have to find nicer ways, right? I think I have to find nicer ways to deal with it and find ways to start asking people, like, if you're going to act that way, like, what's going on? What's going on with you, bud? Like, what's happening over there that you think that this is an appropriate way to communicate with people, you know? And one of the things I think I need to start straying away from is, like, I really do believe in the trifecta of the unholy trinity, which is the worship of the self, the worship of money, and the worship of stupidity. But I gotta find a better way. Maybe sticking with, like, the worship of ignorance. Like I get carried away. And I know I get carried away. I need to find a better way to articulate that third point, right? That third point, like the worship of ignorance, the worship of stupidity. Just like we love how dumb we're acting. We love how dumb we're acting. Because it so obviously opens me up for people to just become childish and begin insulting in a childish way. So anyway, these are things that I am working on. So my apologies to all of you who tuned in, who expect good content from the Canadian commie. I hope you guys are all doing really well out there in the world. Today I spent my day with a friend watching them experience the absolute worst possible version of capitalism, which is that capitalism will siphon your life away if you let it. That if you just allow capitalists to set the terms of what happens to your life, well, then they would like all of your time dedicated to the most extreme amount of work you can put in for $0, please. And that's the capitalist expectation. That's what they would like to see. And then, of course, this raises stress. People bring it home to work with them. It causes all kinds of difficulties for everyone, and the alienation of the public exists. And it's difficult watching it happen in front of you, and to say to people, like, hey, you got to get away from this. Like, you got to get away from this. But, of course, our need for food and shelter, our need for security and safety, our need for safety is all tied up in this capitalist system, right? And so people feel like they have to do these things, and they feel like they have to put in all of this effort and all of this and concede all of this, because if they don't, then they're not going to be safe. Because as we've always discussed, it's a system of withholding food and shelter. It begins with, we are withholding food and shelter from you. We are exploiting your very basic need for food and shelter. And if you don't actually work for us, then you don't get access to food and shelter. Very, very straightforwardly. Schizo Poster writes, products are purposefully made not to last long. It's basically a fact at this point. Corporations don't even bother to try and hide it. Yeah. Like, if a leader of a country wanted to, like, fundamentally change the relationship between capital and the consumer, they could write a one-line law. All products, all appliances at least, must have a 20-year guarantee. There you go. Done. And if you can't deliver on it, then you don't get to make the product. And of course the capitalists will whine about it, and the capitalist simps will cry about it, right? Because they don't want to actually make products that actually last. They don't want to actually participate in the market in a reasonable way, right? They want more money for themselves, period, full stop, and they're willing to destroy the planet to do it. But we could very easily just simply say, like, hey, it's over. Like, if you can't make it to last, you don't get to make it. The idea that we keep making these iPhones, right? The idea that we just keep making these iPhones and the iPhones are designed to break and there's planned obsolescence. We know all about planned obsolescence. Like, we know all about planned obsolescence at this point. You basically have to be purposefully stupid at this point to misunderstand what's going on. Maybe refer to folly, doing things that are contrary to your own interests. Maybe, Timothy. Good to see you, Eric. Good to see you, Conton. Sorry you're having a day, man. You always seem to be having a day, Conton. I'm sorry you're having another one. I do just think I need language that is not directly insulting in order to discuss this third point. This intentional stupidity, this intentional obtuseness, this intentional ignorance, just this intentional, like, obstructionist, this intentional anti-intellectualism, right? Like, I just don't know how to do it. I'm constantly looking for that language and where that language might lie so that we can discuss the subject without getting into this sort of petty argumentation or petty insulting, right? But it exists for sure. Like, it exists for sure. And I know that you guys understand what I'm talking about. This purposeful, intentional stupidity, this purposeful, intentional refusing to acknowledge reality in front of you, on purpose, and then saying things that demanding clarification or demanding definitions or demanding argumentation on points that are intentionally obtuse, like just this complete lack of desire to learn or understand anything, this purposeful stupidity. And I don't know how to discuss it without using that language, because that's what it is. Like, what other word exists other than intentional stupidity? Like, it's just difficult. Because, like, folly isn't quite accurate. Like, and ignorance isn't accurate either, right? Like, it's like the word that exists in our language to encapsulate the idea that I am trying to articulate is actually stupid. Like, it is. That's the word. It's not that they're ignorant. It's not that they are in pursuit of folly, right? It is just like an obtuse stupidity, because that's all that remains. Like, you've got to look at the situation and pretend as though you're intelligent and pretend as though you're capable, but then be a very stupid person. And you can see this with people like Peterson. Like, Jordan Peterson is, in my view, like the glowing, shining star of this, right? Somebody who sounds intelligent, who puts a lot of work into creating big, long arguments, but at the end of the day is just obtuse and stupid. Just, like, and I don't know how else to discuss it. Grinning says, have I read Turchin's book, End Times, Elite, Counter-Elites, and the Path of Political Disintegration? I have not. Yeah, let's take a look at that. I'm always in for new books, and always new. If you can find an audiobook version of it, End Times, Elites, Counter-Elites, and the Path of Political Disintegration. All right. Peter Turchin brings science to history. Some like it, and some prefer their history plain. But everyone needs to pay attention to their well-informed, convincing, and terrifying analysis in this book. All right. We'll put that over there. Something worth pursuing. Yeah, willful ignorance. Yeah. Schizo poster. Yeah, they're just pumping out one iPhone after the other with the most minor of changes made to them and selling them for a higher and higher price. Yeah. Because they've created like a weird little cult. Like they've created a weird little cult. Mikhail, good to see you. Good to see you, Mikhail. Hope you guys are all doing well out there, right? Good opportunity. Hit the like button. Hit all the things, bells, whistles. Tell people I exist. The money, right? You guys all know this. Willful ignorance. Yeah. The worship of willful ignorance. The worship of... maybe it is like the worship of mythology, right? Like maybe it is like the worship of like it's yeah, there's something there. Like it's this worship of like tribalism. It's the worship of the tribe. It's to do anything possible in order to avoid the truth and avoid reality, right? Like yesterday, one of the things that actually really upset me in reflection was that a person started mocking me for pointing out that money isn't real, right? But he was saying like, oh, you just sound like a weird stoner guy saying this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, if that's what you need to do in order to deny the reality of the situation, right? If you need to pretend as though what I am saying is something that like some stoner guy is saying, like, whoa, man, I can't believe, can you believe money's not real? Whoa, if that's what you need to do in order to maintain your position. But the truth, right, the truth is that money isn't real. Like, and there's nothing you can do or say to change that fact and change that reality. There's no amount of wishing or mockery or anything that you can do to pretend as though money is suddenly real. It's something we made. It's something we manufactured. Money is faith, right? And we worship it, right? And we worship it. And so it's the oh, well, that's very kind of you, grinning. How much to donate for a Comrade Milo emoji? I got to get on this stuff, honestly. I got to do better with this kind of thing to try and get, like, more of these emojis or more of these kinds of things. You're not wrong about that, grinning. Thank you for the donation, but I appreciate it. What is a word that is like the denial of reality? Maybe that's what it is. It's the worship of delusion. It's the worship of delusion itself. It's to believe that something that is obviously false is true, and to commit to that. And that through the worship of delusion, you become stupid because you have to be, right? But I don't need to talk about that. I can talk about the delusionary or the illusionary part of it. And maybe saying something like the worship of illusions would be more useful. Because I've always known that saying like the worship of ignorance or the worship of stupidity is alienating language. And that I've always known that it pushes against people and moreover opens up the door for them to say things like, oh, this is just childish insulting. I don't need to listen to childish insulting, right? Like that kind of thing. And so maybe something like the worship of illusion. Yeah, because it is like, it is all an illusion, right? Like money is essentially an agreement, right? But like, so it doesn't exist. It's not like a real thing, right? Well, I'm trying to sort of crowdsource it, you know, because I do think that like, I just do think that I need to sharpen this language. It needs to get sharper. Magical thinking, yeah. And if it's personally insulting, if it comes down to like personal insults, then that's not effective. That's not effective because someone can always shrug and say, "Oh, he's just childishly insulting people," right? And they could just walk away from the conversation being like, well, I can just discard everything that this person says because they said the word stupid one time, right? Like, and so that's the trouble with being a leftist, right? Is that your language needs to be well chosen, and it needs to be specific, and it has to be that way, because we are living in a society where people believe that communism is the worst thing that's ever happened in history. Forget about what the Nazis did, right? Aaron, good to see you, my man. Some situations where people are being willfully ignorant, they are doing post-truth propaganda. Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, sometimes people know that they are being willfully ignorant on purpose, so because it benefits their side and their worldview, right? So they know that they're lying, and they know that they're not telling the truth, right? A magical thing to me is when people want to create something so true, so bad, they create a mythology around it to defend the point. Yeah, and I definitely think that we are existing, like so much of what I talk about in that trifecta, that the worship of money, the worship of the self, and the worship of illusion. It is all magical thinking. Not one part of it is rooted in reality, right? Not one part of it is actually rooted in anything that you can even begin. Like, the worship of the self, to me, is the worst one, right? Like, the worship of money makes a certain type of sense, because money is still used as a tool, right? And so there is this argument to be said that, like, well, money in the society, sure, it's just a series of agreements, but those agreements are useful, and we can, yeah, blah, blah. The worship of the self is the one that I'm just like, what the fuck are we doing? What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? That the people who ascend the hierarchy are the most competent and the most intelligent? Like, what a bunch of trash that is. Like, what a bunch of obvious garbage. That, like, literally the people at the top were born that way. We are all randomly generated life forms, right? The energy of the individual cannot supersede the energy of all other individuals who have ever existed through time, all institutions who have ever existed, including the ones who are existing today, and then all the forces of the universe itself. Like, get the fuck right out of here with this junk thought, right? But it is how people think. It is how people think. That, like, it's all just money up, you can do it, everything's fine, right? You just need to struggle harder. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous on the face of it, and yet it's, like, central and core to the way we think about the world. Yeah, I don't think people are stupid or ignorant. They are simply doing what's needed to maintain their power. Yeah, and I think you're right about that, Gritting, is that, like sure, we could say that they're being intelligently dumb, but that being intelligently dumb is a strategy, right? We got a fellow on Twitch here. It's Goose Baby. What are we up to? Bro, that's a beard if I ever seen one. Thank you, my man. This is only a year of growth. Can you believe it, Goose Baby? Like, oh my God, look at this, eh? I can't even believe it. I didn't think it was going to do this, man. I just let it start happening, and it started happening. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. It's a little over a year. It was July 1st. I actually went back through my YouTube videos and took a look when I started growing it. It was July 1st. Essentially. And so this is about a year of growth. It's crazy. It's crazy, man. Stick around. A year later, it'll just be right down to my waist. I'll be, like, throwing it over my shoulder and stuff. Crazy. Yeah, I'm a Canadian, my man. What tipped it off? What tipped it off? Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm based out of Mexico. I'm just messing with you, bud. I'm just messing with you. I'm trying to have a good one today, man. Okay, let's get away from this conversation. This is a little here for the braided beard. You know what, man? I've been experimenting with the braided beard. I could already do it, I think. I could already do it. Let's get into some hardcore stuff right away. Let me get this one off the table. I want to read this one out loud. I've been meaning to for a long time. Well, for a long time. I've been meaning to read something more meaningful on the stream for a while, and this one, I think, counts. This is from The Gray Zone, written by Alexander Rubinstein, or Stein, my apologies. Zelensky holds court with Ukraine's most notorious neo-Nazi. Western media has dismissed evidence of neo-Nazi influence in Ukraine by citing President Zelensky's Jewish heritage. But new footage, published by Zelensky, shows the leader openly collaborating with a fascist ideologue who once pledged to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against Semite-led Untermenschen. Ukrainian President Vladimir, I can never pronounce this first name. I gotta be honest, guys. I don't want to say Vladimir. Volodymyr Zelensky has uploaded a video to his Telegram channel showing him holding court with one of the most notorious neo-Nazis in modern Ukrainian history, Azov Battalion founder Andriy Beletsky. On August 14th, just over an hour after Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced another $200 million in military aid to Kiev, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky published the video depicting what he called an open conversation with Ukraine's 3rd Separate Assault Brigade. I am grateful to anyone who defends our country and people, who brings our victory closer, Zelensky wrote, following his encounter with the unit on the outskirts of Bakhmut. While casual Western observers might not have realized it, the brigade Zelensky was addressing is actually the newest iteration of Ukraine's neo-Nazi Azov Battalion. The 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, excellent fighters, Zelensky wrote days after the consultation in a Twitter post, which also alluded to a separate meeting with the Adar Battalion, another neo-fascist outfit that has been accused of war crimes by Amnesty International. They have stopped the enemy from advancing towards Kostyantynivka and pushed the occupiers back up to 8 kilometers. But the group's origins are no secret. Describing their most recent rebrand in a YouTube video released in January, the unit explained, "Today we officially announce that the SSO Azov is expanding to a brigade. From now on, we are the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade of the Ground Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine." Like its predecessor, the unit is led by Andriy Beletsky, who founded the Azov Battalion and has long served as a figurehead for the closely aligned National Corps political movement. But in spite of Beletsky's rich Nazi pedigree, the video Zelensky published shows him sharing a moment of bonhomie with a white nationalist militant who has described Jews as our enemy, or as the real masters of the oligarchs and craven politicians that have corrupted Ukraine. "How could I be a Nazi?" Zelensky asked on the eve of Russia's invasion, pointing to his Jewish heritage. "How could a people who lost 8 million lives fighting Nazis support Nazism?" Perhaps the question needs to be asked again of the Ukrainian president following the tribute he paid to his country's top neo-Nazi ideologue. Ukraine's Jewish leader meets the white leader. Since Russia's military operations in Ukraine kicked off in 2022, Beletsky had taken pains to distance himself from his fascist past. He now claims that an infamous promise he made to rid the world of Semite-led Untermenschen was actually fabricated by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. But Beletsky's most notorious screed against Jews was not an isolated outburst. Indeed, his record of Nazi-inspired tirades is extensive and has been a matter of public record for decades. Beletsky's college thesis was a defense of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, a group of paramilitary Nazi collaborators founded by Stepan Bandera's Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists that carried out ethnic cleansings of more than 100,000 Jews and Poles. After leaving university, Beletsky quickly embedded with multiple fascist outfits, including the Stepan Bandera All-Ukrainian Organization, Trizub, and the Social National Party, not to be confused with the National Socialist Party of the 1940s Germany. Beletsky left the Social National Party in protest in 2004 as the group began to rebrand and move away from overt neo-Nazi symbolism. 2 years later, he led an organization called Patriots of Ukraine, which has been linked to numerous mob assaults. One Patriot of Ukraine member has claimed the group was behind the seizure and torching of the headquarters of a political party during the US-backed Maidan coup in 2014. According to Ukraine's Kharkov Human Rights Protection Group, Patriots of Ukraine espoused xenophobic and neo-Nazi ideas and was engaged in violent attacks against migrants, foreign students in Kharkiv, and those opposing its views. What's more, Beletsky and some other members were suspected of violent seizures of newspaper kiosks and similar criminal activities. For 3 years running, the organization has gained notoriety for its torch possessions around student campuses in Kharkiv, Kiev, and Chernivtsi. which fill foreign students studying in Ukraine with terror, the human rights groups noted in 2008. During a Patriots of Ukraine general meeting in 2009, Beletsky raved, "How can we describe our enemy, the authorities and the oligarchs? Do they have anything in common? Yes, they have one thing in common. They are Jews, or behind them are their real masters, Jews." In 2011, Beletsky was arrested for allegedly ordering Patriots of Ukraine members to kill a fellow ultranationalist inside the group's office following a dispute, and spent the following years in pre-trial detention, thanks to a resolution passed by the Ukrainian parliament after the Western-backed overthrow of President Viktor Yanukovych. He would ultimately be released in 2014, but during his 3 years in custody, Beletsky managed to have a number of his fascist screeds published in a collection titled The Word of the White Leader. One essay in the collection, dated to 2007, rails against Jews and black migrants, casually dropping the N-word in the process. Ukraine is the light of Europe. Our nation still has enough strength to withstand this influx of foreigners, to cleanse our land and light the fire of purification throughout Europe, the essay concludes. In another essay outlining the ideology of National Socialism, Beletsky praised National Socialism as a great idea, but criticized the Nazis as having been insufficiently eugenic in their family welfare programs. He complained they supported parents with multiple children without considering the biological quality of each individual family. The result, he continued, was a significant increase in the birth rate, but a significant decrease in the percentage of the Nordic type of the population. Because these social benefits are aimed at the masses, they encourage the worst human material to give birth to a child in the first place, the self-proclaimed white leader lamented. A subsequent Beletsky manifesto entitled Language and Race, Primary Issues expanded on this social nationalist concept. Ukrainian social nationalism considers the Ukrainian nation to be a blood racial community. Race is everything for nation building. Race is the basis on which the superstructure grows in the form of national culture, which again comes from the racial nature of the people and not from the language, religion, economy, etc. As for the Russian-speaking population of eastern Ukraine, Beletsky wrote, "The issue of total Ukrainianization in the future social nationalist state will be resolved within 3 to 6 months with the help of a tough and balanced state policy." Following his release from prison, Beletsky got his chance to carry out a campaign of violence against the ethnic Russians of eastern Ukraine. As war broke out in the country, with the Russian majority of the East seeking self-determination in the face of a nationalist post-coup government viewed as Western puppets, Beletsky dissolved the Patriot of Ukraine and formed the Azov Battalion to wage a war against the separatists. Around this time, he was also elected to the Ukrainian parliament, remaining in office until 2019. The new paramilitary outfit set up shop in Mariupol, using the port city as a staging ground for attacks on the Donbass and violently crushing forms of feminist and liberal political expression on the city's streets. Meanwhile, the National Corps, a political party founded by Beletsky in 2016, has been described as a nationalist hate group, even by the U.S. State Department. The party has repeatedly incited violence against the Kiev Pride March, in 2018 calling on all concerned citizens of Ukraine to prevent the march from being held. In 2019, one National Corps leader had a more direct message: "Stay home and don't show up in public, ever. This will make our life easier and keep you safe." Winky emoji. In 2019, it seemed almost as though Beletsky's influence was waning. An electoral coalition he formed with several other prominent neo-Nazis in Ukraine failed to gain enough votes to pass the threshold to gain any seats in parliament. Meanwhile, Vladimir Zelensky won the presidential election on a platform of making peace with Russia. But Beletsky still held on to a trump card as a nationally recognized strongman. When a Ukrainian news channel announced a 2-hour live studio TV bridge between Ukrainian and Russian civilians aimed at fostering a stronger mutual understanding, Beletsky seized the moment to issue a thinly veiled threat against Zelensky if he did not have the event canceled in a day's time. If Zelensky did not intervene, the answer to the Kremlin's little green men will begin to be given by little black men, Beletsky said, referring to the black garb of fascist elements like Azov. Beletsky called on Zelensky to be the leader of a state at war and not a clown, not an artist from oligarchic corporations, but the president. Zelensky responded within the time frame of the ultimatum by denouncing the dialogue and seemingly offering a jab back at Beletsky, arguing that Ukrainians were being manipulated by politicians who really want to get into parliament. A few months later, the pair butted heads again after Zelensky ordered Ukrainian troops, including Azov fighters, to withdraw from a frontline town in the Donbass in an apparent effort to honor the terms of the Minsk Accords. Beletsky fired back with threats to dispatch thousands more troops in open defiance of the president's orders. Zelensky's showdown with fighters refusing his orders culminated with the head of state nearly breaking down on camera and pleading to the militants, "I am the president of this country. I'm 41 years old. I'm not a loser. I came to you and told you, remove the weapons." Just a few short years later, in the midst of a hot war with Russia, Ukraine's Jewish president and Ukraine's most famous living anti-Semite seem to have put aside their differences. As Shakespeare put it, misery acquaints a man with strange bedfellows. Boo-doop, boo, boo-doop, boo. Boo! The whole coup versus popular uprising is a big contention point for you. No, dude, it's a coup. Like, come on. The what they call the revolution of dignity, right? Like, come on, man. Like, let's be done with this, okay? Revolution of dignity. Wikipedia. Like, we're at the point now where I could just show you Wikipedia articles. Like, it's so well documented. Right? The Revolution of Dignity, also known as the Maidan Revolution or the Ukrainian Revolution, right? It's a coup. Like, come on. Like, culminating in the ousting of elected President Viktor Yanukovych, right? Which led to the outbreak of the Russo-Ukrainian War, right? Or also known as the Donbass War. Like, come on, man. Like, we are now committing hard to illusionary magical thinking. Like, if you're actually going to sit here and pretend like this didn't happen, like, I don't know what to say. Like, I genuinely don't know what to say. Because every single time I see anybody talk about the subject, this is what they do. Nah, didn't happen. Okay. Magic is real. We just don't need to exist in a real magical space, right? Maybe that's what it is. It's just the worship of magical thinking, right? Maybe that's all it is. Like, it's beyond well documented. Like, sure, they're calling it things like the Revolution of Dignity. Sure, they're calling it the Maidan Revolution or the Ukrainian Revolution, right? Okay. So you just want to have a semantic argument. Okay. Like, the perception of the Russians, right? Because that's what matters in the conversation, right? The perception of the Russians is that the elected leadership, right, which you admit there was an elected leadership, elected by the people, right, gets overthrown, right, in a revolution, right, a popular uprising, whatever you want to call it, to make yourself feel better, so that you can continue believing in magic, so you can keep thinking magic is real, right? So a popular uprising occurs, right? What political analysts would call a coup, right? So a political uprising occurs to oust an elected leader, right? And the Russians are supposed to just be like, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. It's just magic. Like, if this was happening in your state over, like, if wherever you live, if this was happening in your state over, you would absolutely expect your elected leadership to do something about it. You would absolutely expect your leadership to respond to it. Like, you wouldn't just be like, oh, well, they just had a popular uprising against their elected leadership. That's completely normal. That's completely normal. Like, I just don't know, dude. Like, I don't know why you're so hard committed to believing magic is real. It just is wild to me. Like, it's wild to watch. You might even consider it idealism on steroids. Ontologically, idealism asserts that the existence of things depends upon the human mind. Oh, dude, we're gonna go. Yeah, doesn't matter. People will still deny this is Russian misinformation. Yeah, and people will go to their graves about it. There'll be like an entire other generation of people who will just be like, yeah, it was completely fine that groups of neo-Nazis couped the government or had a popular uprising against the government, right? From the insider, Russia got richer even as the war in Ukraine raged on last year, while the West shed trillions of dollars of wealth. Russians got richer last year even as the war in Ukraine raged on, while the U.S. and Europe lost trillions of dollars, UBS reported. This is from the insider, by the way. The number of Russia added $600 billion of total wealth, the Swiss bank founded in its annual Global Wealth Report published Tuesday. The number of Russian millionaires also rose by about 56,000 to 408,000 in 2022, with the number of ultra-high net worth individuals, people worth over 50 million, jumped by nearly 4,500. But the U.S. lost more wealth than any other country last year, shedding $5.9 trillion, while North America and Europe combined got $10.9 trillion poorer, UBS reported. There were also 1 million fewer American millionaires by the end of 2022, although the U.S. still accounted for over 50% of the world's ultra-high net worth individuals, the bank said. Russia's wealth gains came despite its invasion of Ukraine in February, which has led the West imposing sanctions on the Kremlin that has led to its economy shrinking and triggered a slump for Moscow-listed stocks. UBS acknowledges that wealth trends in Russia are difficult to determine at this time, but did highlight it as one of the handful of countries that had gotten richer in 2022. Rising oil prices could be one factor behind the wealth increase, which, with exports of the commodity a key economic engine for Russia. The cost of a barrel of benchmark Urals crude jumped by about $7 last year, data from Refinitiv indicated. Mexico, India, and Brazil all also added significant amounts of wealth in 2022, UBS reports suggest, while the US, Japan, China, Canada, and Australia lost the most. Not reporting on the existence of BRICS in an article like this is shameful. It's absolutely shameful not to talk about BRICS as an organization within this confine. To not actually mention that, like, hey, Russia's in a big trade organization with Brazil itself, Russia, India, China, and Saudi Arabia. Like, what do you think's going on here, guys? Like, what do you think's going on here? Like, so much for Russia being in the decline. So much for Russia being in this big trouble, right? Yet Cotton writes, John, don't you understand? Neo-Nazis with Article 5 powers is a totally okay and fine thing. That's right. It's totally normal for neo-Nazis to have a popular uprising, right? Not a coup. Can't say that. Popular uprising, though, that's completely fine, right? It's functionally the same thing, but, whatever. A popular uprising against an elected government, no less, right? Completely normal, completely fine, right? But as long as you don't call it a coup, everything's fine, right? One thing about the entire conversation was there was an anti-coup protest, and that part of the conversation always gets omitted, and that one wasn't violent, while the other ones was violent. Well, the Euromaidan crisis, right? It was a protest movement. It started as a protest. Like, the Euromaidan protests were just that. They were protests. And, like, that's fine. Like, people have the right to protest their government. And if a government is wise, they will respond rationally to the protests of their people, right? Like, I think that protesting, like, sometimes people come in here and, like, when the protests against COVID were happening in China, people kept coming in and talking about it. I was like, dude, there's protests everywhere all the time, right? People protest, and they should, right? We should be protesting constantly, all the time, regularly. so that that's how you gain political traction, and that's how you gain political support. And if politicians are smart, they'll respond rationally to it. If they're smart, which many aren't. But the but then the Euromaidan coup gets the Euromaidan crisis, the Euromaidan protests get co-opted, and then it turns into the Revolution of Dignity, what they call the Revolution of Dignity, right? And so whether you want to call it a revolution, a popular uprising, or a coup, which is what it was, because the result was the same. It was the government that tried to lead to extreme. I'll take a source on that. Because the only thing I've ever seen, like, obviously there's going to be a conflict. There's going to be conflicts between police and people, right? That happens in Canada. That happens in the United States. That happens everywhere, right? Marcy Shore. Okay. You know what we're going to see here, Aaron? We're going to see police clashing with protesters. That's what we're going to see. Just like happens in every single country ever across the board, right? Like, I don't know why you're so dedicated to, like, the narrative that is being presented to you, right? This narrative that's being presented to you is what the United States does in literally every country. Like, I don't understand why you're digging your heels in and simply believing magic is real. That magically somehow this situation is magically somehow different. And that instead of it being exactly the same as it's been literally everywhere else 100% of the time, that somehow this situation is different. I don't understand it. Like, I mean, I think I do understand it, right? I think I do understand it. It's just, it's difficult to accept that the country that you live in is on the wrong side. Like, we're the bad guys by a lot, and it's not close. Like, that's the thing. Like, once you recognize and realize, like, it's not close. Like, it's not close, my man. like there is no parity. There is no comparison. People get really caught in this sort of like, well, both sides are bad and all of this kind of stuff. Okay, like, I'm sure that Russia, China, and these places have done things that are scummy. Absolutely. But it isn't even remotely close. Like, the United States is an enormous, massive, huge, large-scale terrorist organization that spreads nothing but misery across the entire planet. It has literally invaded every single country and has involved itself in, I shouldn't say every single country. It's invaded most countries and has involved itself in most countries' political affairs, including coups and the supporting of coups and the supporting of popular uprisings, if you want to call it that, the supporting of revolutions, which it's done all across Africa, all across Latin America, all across the Middle East, all across Southeast Asia, and it's different because it's why. Like, I don't understand why, like, is this different? In what universe is this different? This mystical, magical idea that it's different, why? Yeah, the Maidan protest was peaceful. It turned violent because of the neo-Nazis, and the pro-Ukrainian supporters always ignored the influence of neo-Nazis in the protests. Yeah, of course. No one wants to acknowledge the reality of the neo-Nazi element. No one wants to talk about the Azov Battalion. No one wants to talk about, like, we've got the Ottawa Citizen reporting on how Canada funds neo-Nazis. Yeah. See, there's your problem, Aaron. You're saying America's on the right side. No, it's not. Like, no, it isn't. Like, full stop. Like, full stop. We don't need to continue having the conversation. America is on the side of evil. Like, in all cases, 100% of the time. Like, it's literally, you're trying to convince me that, like, a raving, foaming at the mouth lunatic who goes around and shoots people in the back of the head constantly, shot someone in the back of in the head, and then that time it was fine. Like, put your feet on the ground. Okay, stop existing in this mystical, magical thought. Nope. Oh, so here we go, Aaron. I know you are, but what am I? There we are. We did it, Aaron. We made it happen. Right? Your argument has become, I know you are, but what am I? Well done. You did it. Accuse others of what you yourself are guilty of, right? No. Well, yeah, because look at the premise. Look at the premise of Americanism. We as Americans are allowed to invade any country we like to spread liberty and democracy. We have a manifest destiny, right? We are the greatest country on the face of the planet. Capitalism is the end of history. We live in a capitalist, realist environment. Like, listen to the things that your own country says. Right? Listen to the things that your own country says out loud, constantly, regularly. The basic principles of America are that we own the world. We are allowed to do what we like, wherever we like, whenever we like. We invade whoever we want, whenever we want, for whatever reason we want. We coup whatever government we like, wherever we want, whenever we want. Sure, they can change their minds, but they haven't. But they haven't. What a joke. What are you saying, that Ukraine is the moment that they changed their minds about those things, where suddenly they were like, yeah, we believe in truth and justice for real. What a joke, man. What are we talking about here, my man? Geez, fucking wheeze, my man. America's richest 10% are responsible for 40% of its planet's heating pollution, new report finds. America's wealthiest people are also some of the world's biggest polluters, not only because of their massive homes and private jets, but because of the fossil fuels generated by the companies they invest their money in. A new study published Thursday in the journal PLOS Climate found the wealthiest 10% of Americans are responsible for almost half of planet heating pollution in the U.S., and called on governments to shift away from regressive taxes on the carbon intensity of what people buy and focus on taxing climate-polluting investments instead. Global warming can be this huge, overwhelming, nebulous thing happening in the world, and you feel like you've got no agency over it. You kind of know what you're contributing. You kind of know that you are contributing it to it in some way, but it's really not clear or quantifiable, said Jared Starr, a sustainability scientist at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and a report author. This study helps build a clearer picture of individual responsibility by going beyond what people consume, he told CNN. To do this, the researchers analyzed huge data sets spanning 30 years to connect financial transactions to carbon pollution. They looked at the planet heating pollution produced by companies' direct operations, as well as those relating to companies' climate impacts further down the supply chain. For example, the bulk of an oil company's emissions comes when its customers burn the oil it extracts. That gave a carbon footprint for each dollar of economic activity in the U.S., which the researchers linked to households using population survey data that showed the industries people work for and their income from wages and investments. They found the wealthiest 10% in the U.S. households making more than about $178,000 were responsible for 40% of the nation's human-caused planet heating pollution. The income of the top 1% alone, households making more than $550,000, was linked to 15 to 17% of this pollution. The report also identified super emitters. They are almost exclusively among the wealthiest top 0.1% of Americans, concentrated in industries such as finance, insurance, and mining, and produce around 3,000 tons of carbon pollution a year. To put that in perspective, it's estimated that people should limit their carbon footprint to around 2.3 tons a year to tackle climate change. 15 days of income for a top 0.1% household generates as much carbon pollution as a lifetime of income for a household in the bottom 10%. Starr said, climate impact is not just about the size of the people's income, but the industries that generate it. A household making $980,000 from certain fossil fuel industries, for example, would be considered a super emitter, according to the report. But a household making money from the hospital industry would need to bring $11 million to produce the same amount of planet heating pollution. The report's authors call on policymakers to rethink how they use taxes to tackle the climate crisis. Carbon taxes that focus on what people buy, the food we eat, the cars we drive, the clothes we buy, disproportionately punish the poor while having little impact on the extremely wealthy, said Starr. They also miss the chunk of wealth rich people spend on investments rather than buying things. Governments instead should focus on taxes that target shareholders and carbon-intensive investments, the report said, although it will be a hard political ask, the Star acknowledged, especially as the wealthy tend to have disproportionate political power. Many ideas for taxing carbon have been floated around the world, including windfall taxes on fossil fuel companies and wealth taxes, but few have been politically viable, i.e. the politicians are bought. Kimberly Nicholas, Associate Professor of Sustainability Science at Lund University in Sweden, who is not involved in the report, said the study helps reveal how closely income, especially from investments, is tied to planet heating pollution. Sometimes when people talk about ways to tackle the climate crisis, they bring up population control, said Mark Paul, a political economist at Rutgers University, who is also not involved in the study. But studies like this shine light on the outsized responsibility that rich have in generating and perpetuating the climate crisis. Identifying the main actors behind the climate crisis is vital for governments to develop policies that cut planet heating pollution in a fair way. Although he disagreed with the study's assertion that carbon taxes on consumption disproportionately affect the poor, saying there are ways to implement them fairly, the outsized climate impact of the rich, of course, far from just a U.S. problem. Globally, the U.S. heating pollution produced by billionaires is 1 million times higher than the average person outside the world's wealthiest 10%, according to a report last year from the nonprofit Oxfam. At this moment, the way the economy works is that it takes money and turns it into climate pollution that is destabilizing life on Earth, Nicholas said, and that fundamentally has to change. America, America, it's super working out. Like, the reason the United States is doing what it's doing in Ukraine is so that it can sell weapons and privatize Ukrainian land. That's it. Like, full stop. It's so it can sell weapons and privatize Ukrainian land. That's it. It doesn't actually care about, like, those Russians doing bad things and we got to do something. Like, it literally is, where can we sell weapons? How can we convince the public to keep allowing us to tax them? How can we take people's tax dollars away from them and funnel it into our pockets and convince them to allow us to do that? I know. We'll create a war. Infinite money, just flood the area with as much weapons as possible. Right, and then you also get to buy up all this Ukrainian land as Ukraine fractures. That's the entire reason the war exists. Full stop. There's no other reason for it to exist. Yeah, they riled up the population, cut off every other option. It was not an authentic popular uprising. They invested $5 billion in the coup. Yeah, and it's going to pay out, right? Like the investor class is going to get all that Ukrainian land. Right? That's good farmland. There's lots of resources in Ukraine to be exploited. Ligand to Z, privatizing and buying up Ukraine is not being on the side of the people of Ukraine. Neither is prolonging this war for war profiteering. Yep. Getting the Ukrainians to just throw themselves against the Russian battle line and being slaughtered. Right? That's not helping them. That's not helping Ukrainians. Right? This entire conflict should simply not exist. Like, full stop. The fact that the conflict exists is ridiculous. Like, if the Ukrainians were genuinely interested in pursuing a path of being involved with NATO and pursuing a path of pivoting to the West and pursuing that kind of thing, well, they can gain support and win an election. Right? Like, if you actually believe in democracy, if you actually believe in these principles, right, they can win an election. But they couldn't, and they can't. Like, to the degree where when they actually did have an election post-coup, who got elected? A guy literally saying, we're going to end the war. Like, the Ukrainian people want the conflict to end. They elected a guy to end the conflict. Right? Why is it continuing? Because Nazis don't listen. They don't care. They take money and they listen to who their owners are and who funds them. That's all. That's what this is all about. It's all just about money for them. Like, it's not about, like, Ukrainian nationalism or Ukrainian pride or Ukrainian independence or any of this kind of nonsense. Like, if that were true, then why did the people of Ukraine not elect a leader who was going, rah, rah, NATO, let's go, Ukrainian independence all the way? Why'd they elect a guy who was saying, let's end the war, let's go to the front line, like he did, and try to end this war, right? Like, the whole thing is ridiculous. It shouldn't exist in the first place, and the people who actually have the power to end it is NATO. They could simply stop funding the thing. They could actually say, hey, let's get a diplomatic solution on the table, like the Minsk Accords were a diplomatic solution. That it all came out that the Minsk Accords were total bullshit. That the West never had any intention of following through on them. They were always just a stall tactic. Larry, good to see you, my man. Mr. Moon, good to see you guys. Not scarfing down chicken wings and cheeseburgers would be a great way to deal with climate change. I mean, like, at this stage in the game, hey, we got somebody on Twitch. Seppel, good to see you. Hope you're here to be beautiful. Hola to you as well. The thing is, Larry, and articles like this are showing this to be true. Like, it's not an individual issue. It's not you and me. Right? It's not you going out and having burgers. It's not you going out for chicken wings. It's not you, me, or the mass of the people. It's literally the wealthiest people in the country shooting rockets in space, like private jets, like super yachts, right? Like this is what's doing it. It's not us eating food, right? That's not what's causing the problem. Like, what's causing the problem is that we've handed billions of dollars over to a group of psychos who are converting that wealth into pollution. That's it. I ostensibly agree, Mr. Moon, but I won't read that out loud. Yeah, they say they're on their side, but they keep them out of NATO and the EU. They have no intention of letting Ukraine join NATO. Like, Ukraine joining NATO is a political disaster. And it always has been. Like, what are you talking about? Like, Russia has always said constantly over and over and over and over and over again that they consider Ukraine joining NATO to be the brightest of red lines. There's this great article that was written by, it's an internal document that was written by William Burns, who at the time, in 2009, was the Russian ambassador. And now he's the head of the CIA, and it's called Niet Means Niet. This article gets leaked, and in the article, the guy is essentially saying, hey, every single Russian over here considers Ukraine joining NATO to be an extreme existential threat. They are not cool with it, and they will go to war over it. Like, I don't know what you need to see. Like, and honestly, it just seems as though the people who are like the NATO stans literally are just like, the Russians should be okay with it, though. That's fine, normal, right? We're not going to do anything except the time we did it in Yugoslavia, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Egypt, Niger, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Korea, Brazil, Venezuela, Chile, Ecuador, Nigeria, Nicaragua. Like, no. Like, no. Like it's a country setting a boundary, and it's a country setting expectations and seeing those expectations get violated. Like, it's just straight up. Keep in mind that if U.S. funds NGO that says they fight anti-corruption policies, if they're actually saying that, we are actually doing a coup in that country and fund people to do the work. Yep, that's what's happening. The impact of growing crops to feed animals and their consequent emissions can't be overstated. I mean, no, of course that leads to pollution, but like, honestly, the number one polluter is the military. That's the number one. Like, all of this militarism is the thing that's doing the pollution. Like, you float those aircraft carriers around, right? Tinker, good to see you. Breaking news, Air Canada scum profits on skyrocketing ticket prices. Take advantage of Yellowknife mandatory fire evacuations. Yeah, one word, nationalize. Say it, nationalize. Yeah. We should be nationalizing, like, the food distribution network. We should be nationalizing the communications network. We should be nationalizing the transportation network. Like, the idea that these things have been privatized at all is just absolutely brutal. John, did you see the reports that are coming out where Russians are doing counteroffensive in the Kharkiv region and Ukraine had to evacuate 100,000 people and only the women and children were allowed to leave while the men being conscripted? As a result, it is a matter of time before the Russians recover the entire Kharkiv region, which bring back the Russian territories back to pre-September Ukrainian offensive in the northern region. I mean, I haven't seen that, but like, look, my position on this conflict is that it's the Russians' game to lose. At this point, like, they are willing to conscript, they are willing to bring men into the field, they are the ones that are changing their economy, they are the ones who can turn to their own people and say, we got to keep digging in, we got to keep going, right? The West has run out of territory. Like, it can only go so far. And you can only send so many weapons, and you can only send so many things before it really does become, okay, but who's shooting the gun? Like, where's the men? Where's the manpower? Right? That what that conflict requires on the Ukrainian side is men. That's what it requires. And if it came down to it, if the Russians were like, oh damn, if we don't get more men in here, we're gonna lose. Well, then they would do another mobilization, right? They have that ability to do that, and they can do that, and they will do that if they need to do that. There's nothing like that on the NATO side, and that to me is the entire thing. That like when that kind of thing came into focus, that's more or less when I really stopped paying too much attention about what was going on, and I just kind of came to understand that it was like, it's going to be like jostling and vying back and forth and all that, and like the American side would always say we're winning this thing, and the Russian side would always say we're winning this thing. That at the end of the day, the Russians have more people, they've got more men, they've got and they're more incentivized to actually change their economy into a war economy, right? And they're doing it. I don't think it's a good thing for them or the world that the Russian economy is becoming more of a war economy. I don't think that that's a good thing overall, but that's what it is. It's basic supply and demand. People stop buying Costco chickens and there won't be any more. Blaming the rich for their share may be 100% correct, but it doesn't absolve people of the power of voting with their wallets. But people are happy and lazy to eat turkey dinners and lamb roasts. It's just weird to complain about climate change and then hand wave ways of making impacts. Right, but like, there's a difference between like, oh, we could all collectively do something and vote with our wallets. Like, and I've always despised this voting with our wallets thing. We don't have any money. Like, we're not the ones holding the money. Vote with your wallet? What are you talking about? If we all collectively got together and decided to vote with our wallet, well, one billionaire can destroy that. Like, the issue is that there are billionaires in the conversation, and the issue is that there's the super rich, and to pretend as though we're all going to get together and stop buying chickens and that'll be the thing. When the honest to God's truth is that there's a fucking monster in the room who's obviously the problem, right? It's to me, it's nothing short of a coping mechanism. It's just a way to just kind of pretend as though I'm trying my best. I'm doing my best. Yeah, and I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. Absolutely, I'm sure you are. Right? I hate to break it to you, it's all for naught. Why? Because there's a fucking billionaire. Because there's a billionaire. I just don't think you're taking it seriously, Larry, what I'm saying. Like, I just don't think you're actually hearing what I'm saying. Like, for real. Like, vote with your wallet. You have $1, I have $1 billion. Who has more votes? Real straightforward and real basic. And I just don't think you're accepting the scale and the level of the disparity. That you actually seem convinced that if the mass of the population got together and just pooled their money, that or withdrew their money, that would somehow have the effect that you want it to have, and it won't. Because there are billionaires. There are people with billions of billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, right? And what they are doing, like, the pollution isn't coming from chicken nuggets, right? It's not coming from chicken nuggies. That's not where the pollution's coming from. Like, it's coming from the United States military. Great. Like, that'll have the 0.1% change in the conversation, right? Like, literally, these guys are shooting rockets that are producing more pollution than the entire country does in a year. Like, literally, we are watching billionaires create hyper-pollutionary projects, and we are watching the United States military embark on hyper-pollutionary projects. And you want to talk to me about tofu? I'm just like kind of flabbergasted by it, honestly. Like, I'm just kind of like, what? Why? Like, I mean, do it if you want, if it makes you feel better. Like, I'm just like, like, we're even starting to get like, here's a report straight out in front of your face. I literally just read the article from CNN Business. America's richest 10% are responsible for 40% of its planet heating pollution. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. What are we gonna do? Like, what are we gonna do? Like, even if over 20% of emissions literally are coming from chicken nuggets, I'll take a source on that. Like, I'll take a source on that claim. Because if 20% of emissions are coming from chicken nuggets, like, yeah, I'll take a source on that. Opinion on Just Stop Oil movement in the UK. They're sticking themselves to pavements or highways there. Regular people are sick of it. They get out of their cars and start abusing them. Yeah, I'm more or less of the opinion that the Just Stop Oil movement is designed to discredit legitimate anti-climate change protest movement. That's more or less what I think they are for, right? Like, they're designed to be like annoying. They're designed to alienate regular people and alienate the populace, right? They're designed to be annoying. Like, I take a look at the oh my God, it's fucking this hyper individualism, Larry. This hyper individualism. This idea that it's like every individual just needs to individualize their own individualism and individualize their individualism. Then the individuals will individualize their individualism, and then we'll all individually individualize our individualism, and the individuals will resolve the issue individually. It's exhausting. Like, it's exhausting. Like, it's straight up exhausting. It is a form of gaslighting. That's the thing. Like, I don't think that you are trying to gaslight. I think that you are actually being well-meaning when you talk this way, but it is a form of gaslighting. It is a way to say, don't worry about the billionaires, just focus on you. Just do your thing and don't gather en masse and do anything about the billionaires. But no, you're not. You're talking about individual action. That's what you're doing. That if we all just do our individualism, if we all individually individualize our individualism and do this thing individually, each individually of us individually, and don't ignore the people who are actually producing the most pollution, right? Like, you're literally funneling the conversation away from the billionaire class. You're literally doing that. Every single time the subject comes up, is this what you do? You funnel the conversation away from the billionaire class, away from the rich, away from the wealthy, away from the military, and instead say, hey, you're eating chicken nuggets. Is that what you do? Is that how you have this conversation? Is that the conversation that you're actually having with people out in the world? Like, it's a form of gaslighting. It's hyper-focusing on the issues that matter the least, that have the smallest impact, so that you can cease talking or stop talking about the issues that matter the most. Yeah, okay, let's do literal collective action to have the least amount of impact then, is your argument. Right? Let's all get together and create a revolution to have the smallest impact. Like, if we are going to get together and collectively agree and have a revolution, it should be under the banner of eliminating the real problem. Like, this is the thing that is frustrating about this conversation, because you are gaslighting people. That is why, and you're pretending like you're not, which is exactly what gaslighters do. This is gaslighting. What I am seeing here right now is gaslighting, and I am sick and tired of watching gaslighters gaslight people about climate change issues. What you are doing is coming in here with gaslighting talking points that the gaslighting oil industry wants you to say to gaslight us, so that we won't say, hey, let's get together and form a collective action in order to incarcerate the fossil fuel industry executives. No, just chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Yeah, best not to have I'm the crazy one, right? Stop gaslighting me. Stop gaslighting me. If you continue gaslighting me, I will ban you. This is gaslighting. What you are doing right now. You get a timeout. Do not gaslight people. What you are doing is gaslighting. Black and white. And if you come in here and gaslight me, and if you gaslight other people out in the world, you will be banned from here and you will not get to come back. This is a timeout. This is your only warning. Do not gaslight me. Fucking brutal, man. Fucking brutal. We got Orange Cat. Orange Americat. Nice. Good to see you on Twitch. Hope you're doing well. Like, this is not a way to talk to people. This is not a way to talk to people. If this is how you talk to people, stop talking to people that way. Full stop. What you do is gaslight people. You are gaslighting people. Full stop. This is an inappropriate way of having conversations. Gaslighting people is not okay. If this is how you talk to people, I don't want you around. They can't gaslight once we cut off the gas. Absolutely. Like, I'm so sick and tired of watching this happen. I'm so sick and tired of putting up with this gaslighting conversations. Because that's what it is. Don't actually have a conversation about the serious issue. Have a conversation about an issue that matters less. And if you have a problem with that, then you're the problem. Okay. We should all take all of our energy collectively together and do something that doesn't work. And if you point that out, then you're the crazy one, right? Yeah, until we have a seizure of production, we cannot dictate how we consume, right? That the solution from the capitalist will always be the cheapest, dirtiest, shittiest solution, 100% of the time, right? And simply saying, well, just stop eating the thing, well, then they'll start producing something else in the shitty way. Like, you think if we all start eating tofu, they're just going to be like, oh, they're all eating tofu. We'll just mass produce that in a way that doesn't pollute. Like, they're obviously going to. Right? That the trouble is the method by which it is produced, not what is produced. And they're just going to continue polluting because it's cheaper, because they're externalizing that pollution. Like, it will always go down that way. It will always go down that way. Evan the Gracious One on Twitch, good to see you, my man. The biggest lie of the capitalists is arrogantly claiming we can build our own communist communes within the framework of capitalism. Yeah, I see that all the time. Like, if you wanted to be, if you wanted to have a critique for someone like Richard Wolff, that's essentially what he's espousing, right? He's essentially saying that what we need is worker co-ops, and that we should all come together with worker co-ops, as if the system of capital is going to allow those to persist and to take everything over. It's easier for us to stop eating this stuff. My kids won't eat unless it's highly processed. The food has changed our guts and brains. Do you know much about the standard of living in China's large coastal cities? I mean, the standard of living has definitely gone up, Ben. Like, the standard of living has definitely gone up. I have an article here or something from China. Here we go. China's Communist Party imposed new regulation today requiring artificial intelligence to promote Marxism-Leninism with Chinese characteristics. Goal is to spread communism globally. Like, what? Weird that a group of capitalists would require AI to promote Marxist-Leninism with Chinese characteristics. Right? Strange that, like, a whole bunch of capitalists who are obviously capitalists, because capitalism's the reason China's doing so well, right? They're capitalism. They're capitalizing their capitalism, right? That's how they did it. Are requiring artificial intelligence to promote Marxist-Leninism, right? Wild. Washington Times. I also hate the mentality of this victimhood blaming to deny systemic issues. There's a conservative today who is arguing with me that redlining and school funding systemic issue is a myth. Yeah, it's just the worship of illusion, right? Like that we can't acknowledge reality. If we actually acknowledged reality, we would have to actually do something about it. Like, nothing smashes apart the capitalist worldview like reality, right? And so you've got to deny that redlining exists. You got to deny that school funding systemic issue is a myth. You just got to pretend like these things don't exist, because if they were real, then you would have to be like, wow, that's a major indictment of the system of capital. Cybin 18. Stop eating chicken nuggets. How about we stop Taylor Swift from polluting the environment with her super jet? Way more detrimental. More or less my point, right? More or less my point. There are a few communes in North Call. Some grow apples, some grow weed, but they all sell outside market to make ends meet. Yeah, and like, as long as it's small scale, right? No, there are communes all across Canada, right? There's like Hutterite colonies, and there are colonies all across Canada. But as long as they're small scale, as long as they don't become the norm, right? I feel communes don't scale over a certain limit, like 200 to 300 people. I would tend to disagree with that. Like, I think that you do need to have an organization, like and 200 to 300 people feels right, that you should have like a group of people who make decisions for their neighborhood, right? And then the group of people next door make decisions for their neighborhood, and then you have like an interaction between those two, right? But I think that it would definitely work. I don't know that they were communists. It's just a Hutterite colony, right? It's just how it is. He was citing this company that I never heard of as a way to back up his claim about studies that supposedly disprove this myth. But I do know that conservatives' think tanks always distort reports. Of course they do. Yeah, of course they do. Like, of course they do. Oh yeah, I saw this. This is crazy, actually. Like, just thinking about this. Like, how is this not a movie or a television show or some kind of media? How is it that there isn't a story being told today and a movie being made today about this very situation, about this very phenomenon, where a character gets this happen to them and we all watch this happen to them, right? How is this not something, how is there not like a Charlie Chaplin level character where this happens and we all watch it happen, with the understanding that this has become the new normal for all of us? This is so unbelievably typical night after night in San Diego. People are exited from hospitals in hospital socks with nowhere to go and cry for help while security just watches. This is a medical and humanitarian disaster, 24/7, 365 days a year. Like, I can just picture it, right? Like, she's got like a blue sock on. So let's say she like has broken her foot or broken her leg or something, and she's in the hospital, and they're like, oh, you don't have any insurance, and so they just take her and put her out on the corner with a broken foot, and she doesn't have a cell phone. Her cell phone broke or something, so she doesn't have anyone to call or anything to do, but she can't get around. She doesn't have a wallet, and the hospital just watches her, right? Like, this is what's going on. This is what pisses me off. Like, this is the reason why I get so pissed off. That's sort of the banality of where people are finding themselves now in these conversations. Like, this just sort of banal, like, oh yeah, just like pick up litter. You know, stop eating chicken nuggies, right? Just this banality, this banal nothing burger. Like, just do your best, everybody. If we all get together and agree to give each other big hugs. Like, enormous, massive, huge institutions, multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar institutions that persist across the West are acting this way. Like, I just do not take this individual responsibility line seriously at all. I think it is garbage talk. Bob Dobb, sub-genius. You're not sub-genius, Bob. You, for all you know, you could be a genius, Bob Dobb. Isn't it Bainai? I don't know what you're saying to me, my man. Good to see you, bud. Besides that beard, what other superpowers do you possess? Unfortunately, Bob Dobb, I have the ability to see through bullshit, and it's a real detriment. I gotta say, it's a real curse. You're a landowner? That's fine. Lots of people are landowners, my man. Are you a landlord? That's the real question, Bob Dobb. You've been to North Korea, you claim. How interesting. Like the history of North Korea is a heartbreaking one. That the destruction of Korea, the separation of South and North Korea, what I like to call Korea and occupied Korea. It's pretty difficult to watch. Oh, you're a landlord since you lease your land. And how'd you get your land, Bob? Which one is occupied? South Korea is occupied. Greg Wick Sorefleet. John, talk about a utopian society without currency like Star Trek and other in popular culture and media. Thanks, buddy. That's real broad, man. One thing that's really interesting to me about Star Trek is that it never really discusses it, right? And that it steadily sort of abandoned the concept of a society without currency, right? That Star Trek and Star Trek Next Generation always were like that. But then suddenly in Deep Space Nine, there's gold-pressed latinum. And that there's sort of this understanding that there is always this like common currency that exists and persists. And that you'll never get away from it, right? And so hey Bob, what do you actually do? Like, do you do anything? Or do you just live off of the money that you do for leasing the land? Like, money is so made up. Like, it's so fucking fake. It blows my mind that there isn't a better understanding and that we all don't have a better understanding about the falseness of money. Oh, yeah, okay. What do you do, Bob? We're so entrenched in this idea that money is real and that we have to have money and that money is an important part of our existence that we can't even imagine a world without it. Like, we can't actually imagine a world in which money, a hope for a future without a currency system. I mean, I actually think that the best we will ever do is that we'll have a currency system, but that the currency is just behind the scenes, right? That there'll be like a group of government employees whose job it is to sort of make sure that the books are balanced in a way that makes sense, that like things are flowing in the right direction and all this kind of stuff, but that the public will basically be like, oh yeah, I guess money. You know, okay. You know, I'm sure behind all of this, there's this system of currency that exists, and somebody's keeping track of it, but we don't really have to, right? That like, that dealing with currencies and dealing with like societal currencies and all of that will just be a job that somebody has. And it'll be their task to ensure, like if a politician comes into power and says, this is what we want to do, it'll be their job to be like, oh, okay, so we want to put the capital, like we want to put the flows of our currency in that direction to erect that institution to make that kind of thing happen, right? To make sure that like the paychecks go out, but then those paychecks will like not be delivered to that person directly. It'll be delivered to like a financial institution, which would then be responsible for like so the whole thing happens in the background, that the individual will like they'll be able to like lift up the curtain and be like, oh, what's going on back here, and take a look at it if they want. But like for the most part, as long as the shelter, food, and like transportation, healthcare, like as long as the system's working, I think the average citizen's not really going to give a shit. Right? And then if they want to do something a bit more grand and a bit more involved, right, they'll go talk to somebody about it. And that somebody will sit them down and they'll have a conversation about it. Or maybe they'll have to go to like a city council and have like a city council meeting. And the city council will be like, oh, you want to put a business here? Oh, okay. So that'll mean X, Y, and Z, right? And there'll always be somebody who's like flowing, like all of that will exist behind the scenes, and it'll be someone's job in order to sort of make sure that that all makes sense, right? But the rest of us will just be like, yeah, we're just here living. Like, we're just here living, right? And this whole idea that, like, one person will accrue all of the money and that's the most valuable person in the society is the person with the most money. It'll just be gone. And nobody will care about that. That'll just be like, and like, the paper that we all have, like all the paper money, we'll use it as bookmarks and things like that. We don't really care about it. You know, it just won't really matter to us. This sociopath, Brian Johnson, looks like a walking diseased hybrid robot. He doesn't look normal. Yeah, dude, like, this is the shit the rich get up to. We shouldn't let them. Like, straight up. We shouldn't let them. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Why do I say South Korea is occupied? Because it is. That the Americans invaded Korea. They split the country in two. Literally bombed the shit out of North Korea. Like, destroyed all of its infrastructure above two stories was destroyed. The country was literally turned to rubble. They lost 20% of their population in the Korean War. The occupied Korea, the American forces occupied South Korea, right? They couldn't actually win North Korea over, and so the conflict has been ongoing ever since, right? And the Westerners basically stay occupied in Korea, and the wealth that exists there is the people who are willing in South Korea that are willing to operate with the capitalists. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it would be higher than the places that they turned to rubble, right? And like, yeah, Bob is writing, in North Korea, the following is not legal: freedom of expression, religion, and conscious assembly and association. Yeah, because they're in a state of war, Bob. Like, North Korea makes a lot more sense once you realize that they are in a state of war because of what happened to them. And all you have to do to think that what they're doing is weird or strange is pretend like the war didn't happen. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. Would I move to a place that the United States is constantly threatening with war? Why would I do that? Like, I genuinely don't think you're actually thinking these things through, my man. Like, nor do I think you're being honest, right? I mean, I can see what North Korea is like. There are great videos online of just like walkarounds and things like this. But like, my assumption is that the people of North Korea are more or less living their lives. I shouldn't even say my assumption. Like, it looks to me as though the people of North Korea are living. What are you being dishonest about? Well, North Korea was leveled to the ground. It was turned to total rubble. They're still in a state of war. All of the things, all of the buildings that you saw in North Korea didn't exist. Right? Yeah, right. So was Berlin, and then there was a big effort by the Western powers to rebuild it. North Korea had no such effort. Right? So was West Russia. Like, same story. Like, and Russia's like an enormous economy. North Korea is not an enormous economy. Yet North Korea won't let spies come in to destroy their country. That's right. Like, this is kind of what I'm talking about, Bob. Like, you just don't seem to acknowledge the history of North Korea in a serious way. Like, what was it like, Bob? I can't wait to hear this response. What was it like being in a country that is actually in a fight for its very survival against Western influence and Western power? What was it like being in a country that is deeply skeptical of Westerners for good reason, that literally built, every building you saw was literally built in the last, like, 60 years because the whole place was turned to rubble? Like, and I'm sure this is a serious thing that you're about to say. Greg asks, what do you think about utopias or perfect societies? Is possible for humans to create? When could it happen? No. I don't believe in utopias or perfect societies because humans exist, right? Like, we are not capable of utopia, right? We're not capable of utopia. We're not capable of it. The best that we can do is we can create systems that that benefit the base necessities for humanity, and that's the best that we can do. Like, we can create systems to ensure everyone has food. We can have systems to ensure everyone has shelter. We can create systems to ensure everyone has access to health care. We can create that kind of stability. We can do that. We choose not to, right? We choose not to, even though we've done it many times in the past, right? Even though we've done it many times in the past, but we could do it again, right? We choose not to on purpose for the benefit of a small group of psychopaths. And but once that's taken care of, once food and shelter is taken care of, once the necessities of the society are taken care of, well, then humans are going to act like humans act. And humans do a lot of interesting, strange, peculiar things. And one of the things that I think is true about humanity generally is that we're so puritanical, this is definitely true about the West, but I think it's true across the board. There's a puritanism that exists within our consciousness where we despise ourselves. We see ourselves as dingy and dirty and disgusting and disgraceful, even when we do the most basic and normal things, right? Like, take a look at the perspective of sex that we have. Sex is the greatest example, right? That we obviously love to do it. The internet exists, and we have all the evidence that you could possibly ever need. But if you actually engage in it and you actually do it, then you're dingy and disgusting and disgraceful, and you should have your opinion dismissed. You know, you're just like you're a whore, you're a pervert. There's all of the slurs and everything you want for engaging in something that is built in to our existence that we need to engage in. And so we're highly puritanical. And we're deeply, deeply ashamed of who we are. We're deeply ashamed of our own humanity. And so if we did build these systems that actually sustain human life in a serious way, and take the power away from those that withhold it, things like food and shelter, one of the first things that would happen is that humans would engage in the very things that make us human, right? They would engage in these activities, they would engage in this stuff, and it would become more ubiquitous and it would become more common. And that will create a cultural conflict, right? That there will be a conflict between those who view something like sex is the best example, who view sex as normal, natural, part of the human experience, versus the Puritans who want to keep everybody in sackcloth and keep you behind keep it in private, right? And there's a bunch of these sorts of conflicts that will definitely exist. And so the society will never be like utopian in the idea that like everybody has this kind of idea of utopian where there's like kumbaya and everyone's in love and there's nothing but love and understanding, and we all communicate with one another just in order to sort of resolve disputes in terms of like where should this go. Like people have this imagination that the disputes that we'll have will be like, what color should we paint this building, like that kind of thing. No, I think that the types of disputes that we will have as humans will become deeper, more serious, and more and we'll begin actually having legitimate questions about the nature of our existence, why we are here, what's the point of our existence, what is all of this all about. And none of it will look like a utopian society. It'll be like a bunch of screaming monkeys screaming at each other, because that's what we are, and we can't do better than that. Like, we can't do better than that. As much as we like to pretend like we can, we can't. We are talking monkeys. We will never be better than talking monkeys. If we ever do get to be better than talking monkeys, it'll be after like a million years of really trying to not be talking monkeys, and so the idea of like a utopian society, I think, is a bad one from the outset. And I don't argue for a utopian society. I argue for a stable society. That's what I argue for. I argue for a stable society. That's it. That's it. Let's take a look. What's Bob? Subgenius. Why would I not be serious? There's lots of people who come in here and are not serious, Bob, and you know the reasons why. If you say anything negative about the ruling party in North Korea, you are put in jail. Right, because they're at war. Would you like for Canada to be like that? Obviously not. I wouldn't like for Canada to be at war by being invaded by the United States. That's right. I wouldn't like that. If you caught the North Korea communicating to anyone outside of the country, even by phone or email, you go to jail, right, because they're at war. If you are caught with the ability to access websites outside the country in North Korea, yep, it's jail time, yep, because they're at war. If I were to talk to a North Korean on my own without a handler, that person goes to jail, yep, because they're at war. If you are caught with a book or writings not considered acceptable by the North Korean government, you go to jail, yep, because they're at war. I'm not asking about a war. Of course you're not. That's the point, Bob. Like, that's my point, is that you are, yeah, see, there you go. No, that's just the bottom line. You're just living in a world of magic where reality doesn't matter. You've just decided that the reason why people act the way they act doesn't matter, and you're just creating an alternative reality to exist in. There you go. No, it's not. Bye, Bob. Like, the history of North Korea is that it was leveled by the United States, that the country was divided in two, 20% of the population was killed by the Americans, and I'm not mad, bud. I just don't need to talk to you anymore. You're an unserious person with an unserious perspective. Like, you deny the existence of the Korean War. That's all. Like, you deny the existence of the Korean War and the effects that the Korean War have had on the North Korean population. Like, we don't need to have a conversation anymore. If you're not gonna, but you just did. I'm not asking about the war. They're at war doesn't cut it. That's an excuse. What do you think you're doing there, bud? What do you think that is? They're at war doesn't cut it. Yes, of course it does. Like, of course it does. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I'm sure you were, okay, you were there. You know what it's like. Great. And if you acknowledged what war does, and if you acknowledged what war looks like, and if you acknowledged the effects of that war, and the reverberating effects of war on a population, you would understand why they're acting that way. Right? Like, we killed 20% of their population and destroyed all their infrastructure, Bob. Like, it's a fucking miracle you were allowed in the door. Like, Bob, there comes a point where I gotta tell you, I think you're being purposefully obtuse. Like, I'm not trying to insult you. I just think you're not actually taking the subject very seriously. Yeah, Canada has been at war. Is Canada under the threat of being at war right now, Bob? North Korea is. Like, why do you think North Korea saber rattles its nukes all the time? What do you think that's for? Like, North Korea is very aware that at any moment the Americans could pull the trigger and just decide to roll in. Bob, if you're saying things like Canada is under threat of being invaded, then I don't know what to tell you, my man. Who's threatening to invade invade Canada right now? What's the threat? Where's the threat from? Who's been overtly saber rattling? Who's been rolling tanks and things across our border? Who's been putting aircraft carriers right outside our coast? Right? When was the last time Toronto got leveled to the ground and 20% of the population got killed? When was the last time 20% of the population of Montreal got massacred and all of its infrastructure got destroyed? When was the last time that actually happened? Yeah, that's my point, my man. Oh, you're saying, why would America even decide to roll in for resources? To enslave the population, to steal their resources, and to get cheap labor from the slaves they create, which is what America always does everywhere it goes, all the time, constantly. Like, but why do you think they were destroying North Korea in the first place? Why do you think they took over South Korea? What do you think they're getting out of South Korea? What resources does North Korea have? What are you talking about, my man? We have all of them anyway, my man. My man. Like, hey guys, we have all the resources. We have all the resources, everybody. We've got all of them. Oh man. What are you saying to me, Eric? No, Greg, I like your version of utopia. Take care of necessities. I cannot imagine a utopia that removes the beauty of human diversity and randomness. Yeah, I mean, like, oftentimes utopia is sort of presented as an idea as if it's very clean. There's a sterile kind of perspective, right? And it's that sterility that I really dislike, because it's inhuman. Humans are not sterile. We tried to be sterile, remember, over COVID? We tried that. How'd that go? Right? We are a messy, dirty, fussy, absurd, cacophonous, loud, abrasive, nonsense creature that loves to gather in mass to watch girls shake their booties and see people scream into microphones, play loud guitars, or tell funny jokes. Like we are, or fucking literally punch each other in the face, straight up. We are not sterile, and any attempt to try to create a sterilized version of humanity in the pursuit of a utopia will fail. It will fail, and because it doesn't focus on the stuff that actually matters, which is food, shelter, safety, that just the basics, just the real basics. Like you can really tell. Like, to me, the big reason why the West is in the decline that it is in is because it refuses to focus on the basics, right? Like, here in Canada and across Europe, we were able to say and get a concession from the ruling class that, hey, healthcare, everyone should have access to healthcare, right? Like, if you fall and break your leg, you should have access to healthcare, and that shouldn't cost you. That should be just part of the system. It should be part of the society and how it works, right? But it's telling how entrenched the system of capital is and how entrenched the wage slave mindset is, that they didn't stand up and say, wait a minute, we have the ability to produce food and shelter on a scale we've never been able to achieve before. Everyone should have access to that, no questions asked. Like, we should just all have access to food and shelter, and that should just be part of the deal, right? And to me, if you're not fighting for food and shelter, at the very least, if your mind is not focused on how do you get those basic resources to the people in a way so that everyone has access to them, then you're not actually thinking serious about advancing your society. You're not actually thinking seriously about how do you advance your society in a serious way. And we can have big debates and conversations about the nature of that distribution and how to do that. But if that's not what the conversation's about, then we are just kind of jerking off and killing time, more or less. And then it's upon that foundation that you can begin actually building a serious society, right? Because you can't build anything serious if people are out on the streets starving and desperate. You can't build anything serious off of that. You've got a big, major problem in front of you. And so many societal problems would be resolved by just providing everybody food and shelter. Everybody would be better off if everyone just had access to food and shelter, no questions asked. But seems like we can't actually get it done. Eric writes, the part I find amazing is those who find sex disgusting. They are the same people who are losing their mind about how games no longer go after sexualized women characters and call that wokeism. Dude, just anytime anybody who uses the word woke, just ask them to define it. And what you're going to find is a white supremacist. That's what you're going to find. Get them to define wokeism and what's woke. Hey, what's woke mean? What is that? What's that mean? Woke. What's that mean? And very steadily, just keep asking for clarification. Just look, I don't understand what you mean. What's woke? I don't get it. Like, I'm not from here. I don't understand. Can you explain this cultural thing to me? I've never encountered woke before. Can you tell me what wokeism is? And very steadily over time, you're just going to find somebody who basically says poor people are dirty and white people are the superior race. That's basically where you're going to end up. When they deal with real life women, they all of a sudden are like, women needs to be more modest and wear clothes. We can't sexualize our kids. Yeah, there is an interesting line, right? If it's on the screen, it can be nudity and whatever you want. But if it comes off the screen, whoa, right? Can we get to the kumbaya phase ever? Nah. Like, maybe you can have an evening like that. Bam. Like maybe you could have an event, right? Like maybe you could have a big social event where all the cameras get turned on and there's a big arena and everybody's in the arena and you have people who are the leaders of the moment and everybody in that one moment, that one night, that one day, after all that effort, after everything's put forward, we all sing Kumbaya together and maybe it would be beautiful and it'd be really great and it would persist through time and all that kind of stuff, so on and so forth, but that'll be it. And I think it would be nice. I think that would be nice. It would just be nice if we had one day of it, you know? Deadly sanctions. Can you move to North Korea? I mean, I'd be surprised, actually. I just don't think a country that is in this kind of state of heightened security is going to be interested in it. John, don't you know, slavery is in the past. We learned our lesson. We're good guy Avengers now. Exactly. The DPRK also sits right next to China. There's a military reason to defeat DPRK to stage bases right on top of China's border. Yeah. Adam, good to see you, my man. Many people of Turtle Island are as close to as a utopia will ever get. Give or take a million years or so, yeah. Lou, has there ever been an anti-American politician in Canada? I mean, I'm sure of it. I couldn't tell you who, but I'm sure of it. But, like, the honest to God's truth, man, at this point especially, like, we are essentially a vassal state of America. And really, like, it would be political suicide. Like, it would be political suicide. Like, I just don't think that you're going to get the traction that you think you're going to get. I think most Canadians view the relationship that we have with America from the economic perspective as beneficial. And we don't want to make an enemy, right? We don't want to make an enemy. Yeah, when Ron DeSantis says stop the woke, he means stop the blacks. Yeah, often the case. Yeah, they are at war. Name one resource that America would be willing to invade North Korea to obtain people. Slaves. Very, very straightforward shit, man. Like, very straightforward shit. And Compton also raises a really interesting point, right? DPRK sits right next to China. There's a military reason to defeat the DPRK stage bases right on top of China's border, right? Oh, apparently a guy in the army just recently ran away to the DPRK over racism. Because of racism, he ran away to the DPRK, yeah. And North Korea is rich in minerals. Like, obviously. It's a very mountainous region. Like, it's mineral rich. Like, it's able to build nuclear bombs, so presumably they have access to uranium. Like, no. See, Bob, you misunderstand the character of American capital. You seem to think that there's such a thing as enough. You seem to think that American capital is just going to go, oh, that's enough gold, cobalt, lithium, copper. That's enough. We've got enough of it. We don't need to go into North Korea. We're completely disinterested in North Korea. We don't need to go in there because we have enough. There's no such thing as enough. Enough is a word that is not part of the vocabulary. It's not part of the vocabulary of the corporate state. If the opportunity arises to get into North Korea and destroy it, depose its leadership, coup its government, destroy all its infrastructure, enslave its populations, and steal its minerals, it'll do it. And how do we know? Because that's what it's always done. Over and 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 over again. Over again. Like again and again and again. America has invaded and couped and been involved in military interventions in most nations on the planet. And the idea that they're not interested in doing it in North Korea, get the fuck right out of here. They literally did it. They literally did it, like within living memory. Like within living memory, the Americans leveled the country to the ground, to total rubble, killed 20% of its population, and you're just sort of shrugging, being like, yeah, it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all. It's totally normal to lose 20% of your population and have all your infrastructure turned to rubble. That's completely normal. That's how it always works. That's a normal thing to happen to a country. Like... like, man. Like, yikes. Like, yikes. Like, if my grandfather experienced what the North Korean people experienced and told me stories about it, my position on letting foreigners into my country would be, no, you don't do that. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. Not interested. Like, oh, the Americans came over here, murdered 20% of us, leveled everything to the ground, and the only reason we have infrastructure is because of the communist government. Yeah, fuck America. Death to America. Like, absolutely. And to pretend as though that doesn't exist. That's the shocking part about the conversation. That's the shocking part about the conversation. To just pretend as though that event didn't matter. Irrelevant to the conversation completely. That's the worship of illusion. That's what that is. The worship of illusion. That we're living in a magical world where reality doesn't exist. Citizens frequently try to escape that country to the south, and they get shot. Yeah, we all saw Yeonmi Park on Joe Rogan, dude. Like, we all saw Yeonmi Park. In North Korea, the North Korean people would get out of the trains and push the trains. In North Korea, I saw a rat eat my grandmother, who was also eating the rat that was also eating my grandfather. Like, I don't know, dude. Don't believe everything you see on the internet. And, like, there are defections both ways. Like, the story of North and South Korea is a complex one between family relations. And, like, it's sort of weird that... Yeah, and there's also video of people who have defected and then have gone back. Right? Like, if all you're going to do is pick the evidence you like to create the narrative you like and ignore the evidence you don't like, then there's no reason to get involved in the conversation, right? Like, it's a complex situation where there are people going back and forth on all sides. And it's an ongoing conflict and an ongoing war. Like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of crazy shit. And it pays to remember, and it pays to say that it's a war that was started by the Americans. It was a war that was started by the Americans. They invaded the country, occupied South Korea, decimated North Korea, and now the country is heavily divided between the West, between the North and the South, right? Between occupied Korea and Korea. Like, that's what's actually going on. And of course, there are people who are fleeing from their situations. It's a war. Of course, there are people who are defecting and moving back and going this way and that and trying to find a better life and trying to move here, there, and everywhere. Of course there are. It's a war. Like, this sort of cleansing from the American mind, the reality of their actions in Korea is stunning to watch. It's stunning to watch this willful ignorance. It's stunning to watch this purposeful stupidity. It's stunning to watch this delving into magical thinking that basically says it's completely fine for us to do a full-scale war against a people, to occupy their country, to decimate sections of it, to kill 20% of their population, to draw a battle line, create a perpetual, never-ending state of heightened war. But if they respond to it, they're the bad guys. It's nuts. It's nuts. Like, it's a type of insanity. It's just a type of psychosis. Like we've been so heavily bombarded with this pro-American propaganda that excludes from the way we think about the world our own actions and how we have acted in the world. Like, do you genuinely not know about the Korean War? Do you genuinely not know about it? And do you genuinely believe that the people of Korea should experience such a horrific horror show and then do nothing about it? Like, it's wild to me. It's wild to me that there are people who pretend the event didn't happen. Like, yes, they're authoritarian. Yes, their laws seem harsh. Yes, they're a militant society. Yes, they are all of those things because they are at war. A war that we started and we perpetuate. A war that they are seeking a resolution to, but that we will never allow them to resolve. That if it wasn't for the fact that they are a nuclear power and they have access to nuclear bombs, we would have leveled them again. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, hit all the bells, hit all the whistles. Send me some money. Send some money my way through my Patreon. Thank you for those who are my donators. Thank you for those who are participating. More importantly than any of that, of course, please tell people I exist. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Tell people to come talk to me. Right? Have discussions. Hopefully people will open their minds and think about these things. Like, we literally have a guy who came in here saying that he was in North Korea, but didn't understand that North Korea was a country in a state of war. Like, pretty wild. Pretty wild. It's called the Forgotten War for a reason. Yep. Let it be known that China will not, under any circumstances, tolerate a liberal democratic Korea as a vassal state of the U.S. Yeah. Dave, good to see you. No wonder why the birth rate has declined here in the West. Most men don't even look to date anymore. Yeah, I know I don't. Not really. Like, I tried for a brief moment, but, like, I actually, like, I genuinely think, like, the discourse surrounding dating right now, I really, really hate. I really hate it. Because it basically boils down to bitches be like and boys be like. It's fuck boys be like and bitches be like. And then we all talk about how men and women are acting and what our experiences are with how men and women are acting. And there is like a genuineness to it. Because I think that the things that both sides are saying about the other side have ring of truth. And this is why figures like the manosphere generally has increased in popularity. because it's not like they're lying, right? It's just, they do what most far-right thinkers do, which is that they acknowledge the problem, and then they get to a point, and then their solution goes off into left field. And the solution of the manosphere is more men, man up, get more manly, get more money up, toughen up, right? And whereas I take a look at it and I go, yeah, of course you're all fucked up, right? Of course men and women are all fucked up, right? The system of capital is exhausting us. Nobody has any resources. Everybody is uneducated, poor, desperate, thrown into this. Yeah, dating apps, right? Dating apps are a crazy part of it. The commodification of everybody. That nobody is looking at one another as like, do I connect with this person in a meaningful way? Everything is about economic value of some kind, status. That men want women to be trophies to show off as a status, and women want men to be what's called providers, right? They want sugar daddies. And so what we end up with is a society of pimps and hoes, basically. That everybody's a pimp and everybody's a hoe. And you can be a male hoe and you can be a female pimp, right? But you've got to be a pimp and you've got to be a hoe. That you're not allowed to simply date someone and be with someone because you like them or you get on with them, right? That the underlying principles of capital create inside of us a fear that is so deep that many of us succumb to, well, you know, he's a really nice guy and I like him, but he doesn't have a lot of money. Right? Right? Like that definitely exists. And it doesn't get discussed. It doesn't get discussed at all. Krogo, and we're back? I think we're back. I don't know that it ever blipped out. In any case, somebody let me know if we're actually streaming. You're back. Thanks, Adam. You know, someday Asia's going to straight clobber the absolute hell out of Westerners, and they cry and roll around with broken noses. They'll be confused as well. Yeah. Yeah. That's okay. We had a little moment. Yeah, most people do date within their class. Yeah, absolutely. Like that's the thing. To pretend as though there isn't this class dynamic. There's this actually the best film I've ever seen that actually that deals with this very phenomenon. This phenomenon of class and how class is the deciding factor for relations is Charlie Chaplin's City Lights. That Charlie Chaplin, his film City Lights, the plot of the film is that he is the tramp, right? He's this like, you know, poor kind of bum of a man who encounters a blind girl, and the girl is of a lower middle class kind of strata, right? And he comes to fall in love with her, and they start to build a friendship with one another. And he finds an advertisement for a cure for her blindness. And he decides that he's going to go on this journey to cure her blindness. And this involves him needing to find the money to do so. Right? So he finds, he signs on to take a fight. And the fight is, you got to fight this guy, and if you win, you get a certain amount of money. And it's exactly the amount of money he needs in order to pay for her surgery. Right? And so he does this thing, and he wins. And of course he does it in Charlie Chaplin fashion, right? So it's all entertainment and so on and so forth. And then he gifts her the money without her knowing about it, so that she can have this surgery done, and then she does. And then he decides at the end of the film that he's going to look in on her And he doesn't, it's clear that he doesn't want to just come up and be like, hey, it's me, right? Because it's made clear very much in the film that he needs to hide what he is from her. And then he gets a little too close, and he says something, and she recognizes his voice, and she recognizes that it's him, and she has this moment of gratitude, and this beautiful moment of where they come together, and they acknowledge. She acknowledges what what he did and what he means to her, but then she sees what he is, and who he is, and what class he is in the society. And there's this look of sympathy and pity that comes across her face while he is looking at her with this sort of hope, this sort of desire, but an understanding that it cannot be, because she is stable and he is poor. And that because they are of a different class strata, even though they like each other, they get on with one another, even though he was willing to literally fight for her to cure her blindness, they both know that their love can never be. Charlie Chaplin was tuned right in. He understood more than any other artist in American cinema the class dynamics and the nature of the class struggle that exists within America. And he was able, in the early days of cinema, he was able to make some cinema that was expressly anti-capitalist. And his entire character, the character of the tramp, is an anti-capitalist statement. Can you imagine somebody making a movie today or a television series today where the character is a homeless man walking around getting into trouble? Can you even imagine it? They'd never fund it. Because the capitalists have got on with it. They understand now that you can't have that kind of stuff. You can't have people acknowledging and being serious about what's going on in the society. You cannot raise class consciousness. It's not allowable. Yep, at this point, most of Gen Z is in an existential crisis. Good, yeah, let's get on with that. Like, that. I hope that existential crisis funnels itself into action in the streets, because that's what it's going to have to be. Like, the psychopaths who run this country are not interested in resolving the crisis. They're not interested. Like, they're interested in denying the wars that they start. They're interested in pretending as though capitalism is great. They're interested in gaslighting, right? They're interested in all that kind of shit. They're not interested. They're not interested in coming up and telling the truth about what happens and then paying recompense for their actions. They're not interested in that. And so if you want to have any justice, if you want to see anything, if you even want stability in your society as Gen Z kids, start organizing strikes. Start organizing walkouts. I've been saying it for years, that the only thing kids should be doing is organizing mass walkouts of their schools. These people have nothing to teach you. There is no teacher, there is no professor, there is no scholar, there is no anybody in any institution anywhere that has anything of value to teach you at all, and you should walk out. What did you think about Squid Games? That was a pretty anti-capitalist show, in my opinion. Recent TV show. It pays to remember that it comes out of Korea, right? So the system of censorship that exists and persists in America doesn't exist and persist in South Korea. 1 second. Okay, buddy. What's up? What's up? My man, what are you doing? My man, there's nothing here. Get out of there. Get out of there. You're going to tip over everything, man. You're going to tip everything over, dude. Get out of there. I thought Squid Games was good. But I think Squid Games basically, like, a lot of this stuff floats under the radar, so to speak, right? Like, if you actually explain what Squid Games is, it doesn't sound like an anti-capitalist critique. It doesn't sound like an anti-capitalist game, like thing. Like, a bunch of gamblers get together to play children's games to the death, and the winner is given a bunch of money. Okay, right? That sounds like Cocaine Bear, right? Like, that sounds like a kooky, weird, and like something really easy to pitch to capitalists, right? Something that they would be like, oh yeah, okay, cool, right? Off you go. And, you know, they don't anticipate and expect what's going to blow up, right? They don't know what's going to blow up or how it's going to blow up. And the reason why it does blow up is that it does have that anti-capitalist sentimentality about it, that Western studios would actually distill out of it, right? Like, Western studio, like, there are really, really good examples of this. There's a great show that's in Britain called The IT Crowd. And the IT Crowd is anti-corporate all the way. Like, the leaders of the corporation that these IT guys work for are psychopaths. Like, just detached, lunatic, crazed, nightmare creatures, right? Like, if you guys don't know this show, by the way, The IT Crowd, it's actually like... IT Crowd. It's actually like a real gem. It's a real gem. And if I'm going to talk about it, I might as well get it. Sure. Wow. Here we go. That's great. And it's about IT people working in IT, and that this manager lady, she just talks herself into this job, but she's clueless, right? And the whole shtick is that these two guys are kind of uggos, right? They're not attractive men, they're not hunky men or anything like this, and she's just sort of like a normal-looking woman, right? But they're all comedians, and it's hilarious, and you end up with all these hilarious situations. And the point is that the leadership of the company are desperate, detached psychos, and are shown to be these desperate, detached psychos. And you get a similar sort of thing in the British version of The Office, right? In the British version of The Office, the character that Ricky Gervais plays is irredeemable, right? Like, he doesn't have a redemption arc. He doesn't become like a lovable person, right? He's a reprehensible guy all the way through. Well, then these shows come over to the United States, and suddenly Michael Scott becomes like a lovable oaf who has episodes where you see like, oh, sure, he makes weird decisions and does weird things, but he's got there's a rationale to it. It all kind of makes a type of sense, right? And then in the IT Crowd version, they literally cast in the roles like hunky supermodels, people who would never, ever be in IT and never be part of this kind of thing. And then all of the leadership is crazy still, but they're crazy in order to teach a lesson, right? That they have people do crazy things, but then it all works out to show that the leaders actually are really super smart, right? And you're seeing that kind of... That's a type of censorship and a type of decision making that exists within our culture to be able to try to convince people that, oh, the people who are actually in these positions, while they might seem to be daft or detached or crazy, there's actually a method to their madness, and you just need to trust in what they're doing, right? You see this with something like Parks and Recreation. Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a really good example of that. I'm just like, oh yeah, not all cops are bad. It's just a couple of bad apples, right? These persistent narratives that a show like Brooklyn Nine-Nine exists to reinforce, right? That the studio system in America is extremely, extremely, extremely aware of class consciousness and does everything it can to diminish and lower it in every way in every way it possibly can. What I love about conservative reaction, it wasn't about capitalism. Yeah, I mean, conservatives will oftentimes basically describe capitalism and then say, and that's why communism is bad. Like, what? Get the fuck out of here. A lot of the movie posts 2010 have that insightful feel. Wait, so this is the utter breakdown of civil society as we know it? Dude, the Trump election is going to be wild. Like, the Trump presidency, version 2, is going to be crazy. Like, it's actually going to be nuts. And even if he loses, it's still going to be nuts. Like, these guys are going to be nuts. Can you imagine? Donald Trump is going to be running that election at the same time he's going through indictment proceedings. And if he wins the election, he'll be able to pardon himself. Like, that's... Like, our society is not normal. And it's obvious that it's not normal. Conton writes, I dated a millionaire girl once. Never again, just know. I was broke. She was bothered by me being poor, and it ended up just being boring to her because I couldn't afford to do things. Well, she should just pay. She's the millionaire. Come on. Does she not like you? Like, she should just pay. What's the story? Millionaire girl. What's the point of having millions of dollars if you're not going to spend it on hunky boyfriends? Huh? What's the point? Like, even with her millions of dollars, she's still like, you've got to provide for me. We're going out on this date, and you have to pay for the steak. Like princess syndrome, dude. Like, princess syndrome. Those types of people, like, you see this with, like, quote-unquote hot girls, right? They want to be pampered. They want to be treated like a princess. And what they end up with is they end up with a guy who is willing to play that game for a period of time. But that's not how you have a relationship, right? That you can't have a real relationship where a guy is essentially a simp for the girl and that the girl just gets what she wants all the time and has the guy simping for her constantly. But the girl is of a mind that, oh, I can just get rid of this guy and get a new guy at any time. But then you know what happens? Age starts to set in. And the whole game of passing the baton down the way, right? Going from man to man, jumping from man to man, being simped for man to man. Well, it stops, right? It stops. Because your whole pitch and all you have to offer is that you're a pretty girl. Well, that stops. So try to build a relationship with someone for real. But if you try to build a relationship with someone for real, it means accepting that they're going to have rough patches. It means accepting that they're going to cry, that they're going to need a shoulder to cry on, that they're going to be emotional, that they're going to be weak, that they're going to be vulnerable, that they're going to rage, that you're going to argue, that you're going to have conflicts, that you're going to need to resolve problems together, right? That's what being in a relationship is. And if you're not interested in that, then you're not interested in being in a relationship. And a big reason why people don't want to get into relationships anymore is because because relationships are viewed as just another problem now. And we've got enough problems as it is, right? Like, I've got enough problems. And if I were to start dating a woman and she was nothing but a problem to me, I would stop dating her, right? And I think most people are beginning to see, like most single people are beginning to see that, like, yeah, trying to get into these relationships is just a pain in the ass. It's just a total pain in the ass. Somebody said something earlier and I missed it. The infamous, I don't understand how people can just hook up a few moments after meeting each other. Me personally, I'd like to get to know who I'm fucking first. All women I've dated, I wanted to know who they are first. Yeah. Like, it'd be nice to be like, hey, how you doing? What's your name? Right? You want a little whining? You want a little dining? You want to see if you can tolerate their laugh? This is what I'm talking about, though, the infamous, is that there's a commodification of this. That it's like apps like Tinder. It's created like a booty call sort of situation. Where, like, we all have needs, we all have desires, and so the idea is, like, just, like, boom, and make it happen, right? Just, like, snap your fingers, make it happen, right? This instant gratification. Oh, Eric, actually, this is not entirely accurate, John. I was listening to a U.S. lawyer. She was saying that Trump can only pardon federal crimes, and not most of his crimes are state crimes, except one. At the same time, there is one indictment, and the one about election fraud and incite violence. If he gets convicted for that indictment, it actually bars him from running again. The paper that I find the most amazing and funny is the part of Law and Order where they say that no one is above the law, including the president. And all of a sudden says that Trump is above the law. Yeah. Yep. And despite all his indictments, Donald Trump, he's tied to Biden in national polls. Yep. Yeah, Dave. Like, it's a clusterfuck. It's a total clusterfuck. Watching the Americans collapse this way it's crazy to watch. It's crazy to watch. And how it's become just, like, totally normal. It's just, like, completely, totally normal to Americans now. Oh, yeah, this is how every country operates this way. Politics, eh? No, bro. Land of the free, home of the brave. My wife made me loyal, says Compton. Isn't that nice? When I was just absolutely down, they helped me find the job I have now. She gave me a home and food and comfort when I had nothing, and her patience and help, well, and then a little shiny heart. Well, Compton's wife, if you're out there and you're listening, aren't you just a treasure? Aren't you just a treasure? God bless you, Compton Carrot's wife. Eric says the more indictment that he gets, the more the Trumpist cult gets galvanized, the more the GOP supports him. Has like 50% of the GOP base. Yeah, like nobody can run against Trump right now. Like the Trump train is gonna have to come to an end. It's gonna have to resolve. Like, he literally either will need to become the president, or he will need to, or he'll need to die, or be in prison, and then the GOP will be able to kind of have a fist fight about who gets to be what, and then you'll see like Don Jr. throw his hand in, and I think Don Jr. sees very clearly his opportunity to pick up the baton, to take the baton from his dad and move it forward. A Don Jr. presidency would just be a complete and total clusterfuck, man. He has to be prosecuted now. If he gets to run, it'll totally undermine the democratic process in most people's minds. Yeah, I mean, what democracy, right? What are you talking about? As if the system responds to people in the first place. I also forgot to mention about there are actually talks with lawyers whether or not Trump can actually pardon himself. I gotta tell you, man, like, if the president of the United States can't pardon himself for this, like, the entire argument of the Iraq War was that we're the deciders. We're the deciders. Heh, we can invade what we want. We decide what's going on. Heh, right? Like, so you can illegally invade a country and murder 1 million of its citizens and steal all the oil, and that's fine. But, like, just like a little revolutionary rhetoric. Storm the Capitol one time. Jail for 700 years. Nice. America doesn't make any fucking sense, man. Americans don't make any sense at all. Like, just like this crazy, kooky group of weirdos. Just like 10 corporations in a trench coat. Yeah, gotta say, the way it's all going down, it's absolutely funny. Yeah, as soon as you sort of detach from the horror show, right? As soon as you detach from the horror show, extreme rarity. As soon as you detach from the horror show, it is hilarious. Like, ow. That America is getting taken down by a game show host. A guy who puts his name on the side of buildings and ran a television game show. The Apprentice. Money, 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 money. Money, 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 money. Right? Like, it's... I just don't think that you can write this. You know what I mean? Like, how do you actually, like... How are we going to explain this to the next generation? That the next generation is going to come up and they're going to look at Donald Trump. They're going to look at Donald Trump and they're just going to be like, wait, what? Who is this? What? Like, I can really picture, like, a 14-year-old who's just, like, coming into their cognizant awareness, probably smoking way too much dope, right? Looking at Donald Trump and looking at the history of Donald Trump and just being like, oh, this is the most unserious place ever. I have been randomly generated into a complete and total clown show. Like, these people are unserious. The system that generates these people are unserious. The only reason we have to listen to anything they have to say is because if we don't, we get beat up by cops. That's it. Literally the only reason anyone pays attention to any law that any of these people write down or talk about or say is because if you don't, you get the shit kicked out of you by cops. That's it. And a lot of these guys, a lot of these kids are just going to be like, oh, so if we can find a way to operate within this system without getting shit on by cops, then we should just do that. And so what'll they do? They'll just work for Wall Street. Because no cops beat the shit out of Wall Street guys. Cops respect the Wall Street people too much. Yeah, there's going to be so much cope, my man. Which is more fun? More super pissed mega chuds or some deeply confused and angry Democrats? My thing about the Democrats is, like, I don't know why I'm constantly I'm constantly presented with this idea that the Democrats are normal. And it's just, like, they're not normal at all. Like, I've never seen, like, a group more dedicated to trying to convince me that we're the good ones. It's like, no, you're not. Like, you're so obviously just as bad as the Republicans, right? Like, sure, you wave a little pride flag, right? Not that you actually give a shit. Oh, 1 second, guys. I gotta help my dog. Oh, Milo. Oh, Milo. You okay? You okay? Guest starring... Milo, the snorty pug. 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 Oh, Milo, the snorty pug. Oh, my man. You okay? You're a good boy. You're a good boy. Oh, you're such a good boy. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You snorty little guy. Are you okay? There's your capitalist innovation right there. There's your capitalist innovation right there. I know what we'll do. We'll make it so that they only have snouts that are this big and they'll choke on their own hard palate. I'm not going to lie. I used to like the show The Apprentice. Not The Celebrity Apprentice. I could care less. Yeah, I watched some of The Apprentice. Sure. Like, come on. Who doesn't love game shows? You know? Like, who doesn't love watching people do stupid things and then being judged on the outcome of their actions during that stupid things, and then having Donald Trump just be like, "You fired," like, you fired, like, great, right? And if that's where it had have ended with Donald Trump, you know, he would fade into obscurity, and we'd all just be like, "Oh yeah, I remember The Apprentice." But now it's got like a real, like, there's like something sinister about it now. Go back and watch The Apprentice now, right? You can see like he's gonna point at people and be like, "You're fired," and then they're gonna fire them out of a cannon into like a pool of acid or something. Like that's how it's gonna operate. Walter Matherson video where he demonstrated that Trumpists have no problem with child beauty passions, pedophile, hooters, etc. Yeah, but that's, dude, it's so common. Like, all of the weirdness of American culture is completely fine to most Americans, including Democrats, until gay people are involved. The second there's gay people involved, like, that's the end of it. That's the end of it. Haiti. Dude, everything's on fire right now. And there's like Maui, there's Ukraine, there's the entire Middle East. Like, American culture? You mean NASCAR and apple pie? That's right. That's right, the infamous. That's exactly what I mean. NASCAR and apple pie. For sure. Oh, sorry, buddy. Can't go there. That's going to mess everything up if you go over there. Guys, I hope you're all doing well out there right now, you know? What a strange and odd and unusual world we live in, where we're just like, and we're just all tolerating it, you know? That's the thing that kills me the most about it, is that we're all just like, still going to work, still just plugging away, being like, yep, sure, they're destroying the planet with climate change. Yeah, sure. They're constantly taxing us so that we can go to war with people we don't know. Yeah, sure. Right? What? Eric, what are you talking about, man? Oh, here's a good bit of news. I convinced my friend where not all opinions matter, because she used to say that all opinions matter. What convinced her is not all opinions matter is when Walter Matherson video where he demonstrated the Trumpists have no problem with child. Yeah. Like, some people are trying to, be obstructionist and be evil on purpose. Like, that's it. Like, the only reason a guy like Matt Walsh is talking is so that he can maximize damage. That's it. Like, he believes that Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment. He believes that Hassan hog watchers are entertaining, if not deeply horrifying. Yeah, but these. The phenomenon of Trumpism has itself turned into a type of political entertainment that I think the people who are backing Trump and the people who are backing the GOP, they don't think that that's what they're involved in. that they think that they're stabbing out at the political establishment, but it's just turned into entertainment of its own right. Well, here's a fellow on Twitch asking a really great question, and you know what, man? This is a good way to close out the week. Cause222 asks, can you explain to me how communism should work? Because I don't get it, Marxism. So let's start with the basics, my man. Oh, this is going to be a nice way to close out everything. I hope that you're being genuine, bud. So, there is a group of people in the society who own what's called the means of production, right? That's just the ability to create things, right? So the people who own food production, for example, right? There's people who own the ability to manufacture. This is owning the means of production. They get to decide what is made, how it's made, and how it's distributed into the society. It's an incredibly powerful thing to have access to. And if you have the ability to control food production, and if you have the ability to control shelter, then you can force people to work for you. Because the group that owns those things is actually this small group called capitalists, right? Owners. They own the means of production. They own the shelter. They own the jobs. They own the workplaces, right? They own these things. The only thing that the vast majority of the public have in order to access the food and shelter that is withheld from them by the people who are generating it is their labor, right? So you have to sell yourself into a labor market that is created by the capitalist owners in order to provide a benefit to the capitalist owners. And of course, the only benefit that the capital owners will have from providing a job for you is if you provide them more value than they give back to you. So if they pay you, let's say, $100, they expect more than $100 to be generated for them. And the difference between the wage they pay you and what they take from you, the surplus value that they take from you, is called profit, right? Now, in the libertarian sense, libertarians like to lie and pretend as though this arrangement is voluntary. Well, if you don't engage in this arrangement, you don't get access to food and shelter. So you are forced to engage in this arrangement. You need access to food. You need access to shelter. All you can do to gain access to food and shelter, which is not freely provided by the structure of the society, is to sell yourself to the capitalists. That's the nature of the society that you live in, right? That's the core of it. That's the game that everyone is playing. And no one is free from that game. You are either selling yourself into the system of capital, or you are one of the owners of capital. So you either own wage slaves or you are a wage slave. That's the system of capital that we live in today. Communists say we can create alternative models to be able to alleviate this arrangement. That we should create institutions, we should create structures to provide these services to the populace without them needing, or at least minimizing, the negative outcomes of needing to sell themselves into a labor market in order to provide to have this sustained or provided for. So Richard Wolff, who is probably the best known Marxist, and if you're looking to learn more about Marxism, I highly suggest seeking out Richard Wolff. He's very good. He's a very good place to start. He's probably the most popular Western Marxist today. He believes that one of the solutions that we should be focusing on is creating worker co-ops. So that he calls it democratizing the enterprise. That right now, all workplaces are essentially top-down totalitarian dictatorships. that there are owners, and those owners make the decisions and then send those decisions downward, and the workers just have to do what they're told, and they have no say in the decisions that are made. Well, Richard Wolff says, well, the owners should own these enterprises, and they should have the ability to vote for their management, and they should have the ability to vote for their organization, and they should be able to vote on what happens within the structures that they work in. And in this way, it would alleviate a lot of the negative consequences that capital markets and the capitalist structure inflict on the populace. He points to the offshoring of manufacturing that happened over the last 40 years and says if these companies have been worker co-ops, they would not have shipped their own jobs overseas. They would not have abandoned their own communities in the pursuit of cheaper wages overseas. The goal of any communist and any communist society should be that the necessary universal needs for human life should be made freely available to the degree that it is possible. And then you ask, what country is truly communistic now and is successful? So you've got to understand that the process of moving forward towards communism is a long-term project and a long-term goal, right? You cannot just flick a switch and become communists. It's not how it's ever going to work. There's a lot of institutions in a society, and moreover, the path towards a communist society is not perfectly laid out. And each society has its own way forward. The one that is closest right now today is China. Yeah. So, and you bring it up. Even China, who is communist, practices free market and capitalism. So it's important to remember. So okay, great. And you're being very kind about this, Cause. So I'm more than happy to talk to you about this. Honestly, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So you're right to bring up China, and you're right to bring up China's interaction with capitalism and the free market of capitalism. Right? That the history of China is you had Mao, who led the Communist Party through the imperialists, the Americans and the British and the Europeans out, and the Japanese out of China, took China over for the Communist Party, and for a period of time, Mao's policies could be described as isolationist. That we are going to produce everything we need as China, and we don't need to interact with the capitalist markets, because we view any any capitalists that come in as an infection. That's the Maoist position. Well, there was another group called the Dangists, right, who took the party over steadily over time, who viewed that they said, no, what we should do is we should open up our markets to foreign investment. And we should say to the capitalists, you can be involved in our economy in exchange for please stop bombing countries on our borders, right? We're talking about Laos and Cambodia and Korea and Vietnam, right? So stop that, and we'll allow your markets to come on in. We understand that there will be labor exploitation. That's a part of capitalism. We understand that that's going to happen. But we also understand that this influx of foreign capital is going to enrich China. China, its markets have only ever been about 40% capitalist. And the Communist Party understands, probably better than we do, the nature of capitalism and how it can infect the ruling class. And the Chinese Communist Party views capitalist intervention in their government and in their governing body as corruption. That if they find out that a capitalist is funding a politician, that's considered corruption, and they rout it out, and they attempt to get rid of it. So here's the analogy that I'll give you, Cause. Okay? I think this is a good analogy to think of, and to think of how China thinks of capitalism and how they interact with it. So fire is useful, right? If it will heat your house, you can cook food with fire. Fire is useful, right? If you want fire in your home, well, then you're going to put it in a fireplace. You're going to put it in a stone chamber, and you're only ever going to interact with that fire by using tools and being safe and knowing what you're doing. And should the fire come out of the fireplace, you should view that as an enormous crisis, stamp the fire out, because it only belongs in the fireplace. And so there it should belong. This is how China views capitalism. Conversely, we view capitalism as, oh, fire is good. It heats your house and cooks your food, so we should let fire out of the fireplace. And the fire will decide. And the fire will go where it wants to go. And the great fire will be the decider. This is how we view capitalism. And rather than saying, oh, we should make decisions about where capital goes, we just let the fire decide. We essentially let chaos reign. Whereas the Chinese understand, okay, fire is useful, let's keep it in the fireplace, and until the day that we can replace the fire with something superior, then we will put the fire out. And all of the actions of the Chinese Communist Party, Cause writes, and is the will of the people sort of seen as an illusion? Because most dictators come from communist countries, i.e. North Korea, Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping, Putin, sort of leaders. And but Stalin and Mao, none of those leaders ever gave up their power. So Cause, all of those countries are inherently democratic. They're not our democracy. They're not a Westminster democratic parliamentary democracy. But here, I'll show you. So once you understand the structure of the National People's Congress, right? National People's Congress. You can go onto Wikipedia and you can learn more about this, okay? This is the National People's Congress. It is an elected body that once every, is it 10 years? Once every 10 years, it doesn't matter. Every so often they get together and they hold an election. And 5 years, so there you go. And they vote for their parliamentarians, right? They vote people into the National People's Congress. Here's what the body looks like. You can see there are many different parties, right? There are many different parties. So this idea that the Communist Party of China is a dictatorship, this idea that it is a dictatorship of the proletariat, right? It is a party that understands that the workers should own the means of production and the workers should be the deciders, right? And the result of this, right? The result of this democratic process has been Harvard study Chinese happiness. Did I? Yeah. Harvard, this is from the Harvard Gazette. Harvard did a gigantic poll of China and Chinese citizens called Taking China's Pulse, the result of which was, and it was like 17 years. The survey team found that compared to public opinion patterns in the US, in China, there was very high satisfaction with the central government. In 2016, the last year the survey was conducted, 95.5% of respondents were either relatively satisfied or highly satisfied with Beijing. In contrast to these findings, Gallup reported January of this year that their latest polling on U.S. citizen satisfaction with the American federal government revealed only 38% of respondents were satisfied with the federal government. The reason why this exists is because our system of government no longer responds to its people, because it's a dictatorship of capital. Both of the parties are capitalist parties. Both of the parties operate for the interest of capital, whereas the Communist Party is a party that responds to its people, that it responds to the needs of the people and it responds to what they want, that the people vote people into the National People's Congress. The National People's Congress elects from its group the executive branch, right? From which this is where Xi Jinping sits. Okay, but right? You have to take it with a grain of salt because their media has a lot of propaganda and fear of punishment. Okay. I can accept that to a degree. But really think about the claim that you're making there. Right? China is a country of 1.4 billion people. Like, you cannot run a country of 1 billion people, a country that it had in living memory a revolutionary leader. Mao was a revolutionary leader who committed to a revolution. They call themselves a revolutionary government. Right? Of course they have the right to protest. There were protests during the COVID period. And if you speak out against the government in China, you go to jail a lot of the time. Well, somebody better tell the TikTokers. Somebody better tell Chinese TikTok all about that. Go take a look at what happens on Chinese TikTok, my man. Like, this idea, like, you are now stumbling into the propaganda. You are now stumbling into the Western propaganda trap. And I'm really here to encourage you to think differently. To think differently about China. To think differently about that country. To think differently about how they operate and the things that they are doing. Not everything they are doing I agree with. I'm not a China stan. I'm not sitting here saying we should completely be like China 100% of the time, right? But I am willing to say that they are running a very successful country that is obviously taking the West to task in a fairly straightforward and obvious way. Would I move to China? I mean, I don't have the money to move to China. I don't speak the language, nor do I know anyone there. So, these are major disincentives, right? Those are fairly major disincentives to move to China. But ideally, like if I did know the language, like if I met a beautiful Chinese lass, and she wooed me with her words, like, I'll put it this way, Kaz. I am not afraid to move to China. It's very simple that the hurdles for me to move to China overwhelm the desire. Like I'm not talking about China because I want to move there. Nor am I really talking about China because I want this place to become like China. I just think that it stands as a good example of a country that uses Marxist-Leninist principles successfully. And we should not ignore it. Like, we really, really should not ignore it. That the benefits that China is experiencing, we too could experience. That we also could be experiencing the massive infrastructure projects. We could also be experiencing the poverty alleviation. We could also be experiencing the elimination of homelessness. We could also be experiencing the mass sanitation projects. Like, there are massive benefits that China is absolutely showing us. And for us to simply ignore it based on some weird propaganda idea that doesn't really doesn't really withstand scrutiny, I just think it's foolishness. Our country can be better. We can be better than this. And the way for our country to be better is for us to acknowledge that we have been overwhelmed by a dictatorship of capital, to acknowledge that we have owners who own us, who we have to sell ourselves to, and that relationship is what's holding us back in every single field. In every single field, in every single position, at every single turn. The bottleneck of our culture, the thing that is bottlenecking our culture and is making us culturally constipated, is the dictatorship of capital. And that if we want to actually advance as a society and as a people and make a better society for ourselves, we need to get rid of the dictatorship of capital and install a dictatorship of the proletariat. Only then will we be able to move forward in the process of eliminating the capitalist class and beginning the building towards communism. Cause writes, the idea of ownership is good. If you work really hard, it should be yours. So don't misunderstand that communists make a distinction between personal property and private property. Like, if you want a car, if you want a house, if you want an Xbox, right? Like, if you want that kind of stuff and you want to work hard to get it, and then it's yours, okay, fine. But we create a distinction between that and the means of production. That there really is actually no amount of hard work that you can do in order to own the food creation system. But is the land yours? So the idea that a single individual should own 300 acres of land in order to own the food creation process? Like, how can I explain this? The people who own the land today don't own the land because they worked really hard for it. Throughout Canada and the United States, there's something called the let's just do the Canadian Dominion Act. I spelled Dominion wrong, but that's fine. The Dominion's Land Act, right? What's called the Homesteaders Act in America. During the colonial period, right, white British men were permitted to move to the prairies, to the Midwest, even to the coasts, wherever there was land to be had, and for basically nothing, they were able to secure upwards of 360 acres of land for free. That all they had to do in order to get that land was move to it, and then ostensibly work that land. But if you move to 360 acres of land and can't make money, then there's something wrong with you. This procedure, this policy, has been linked to upwards of 40 to 50% of the wealth held today in America and Canada. So if you are a farmer sitting on land given to you by your father because it was given to him by his father, then that probably means that you are a direct beneficiary of one of the largest government handouts in the history of perhaps humanity itself. And if you sit there and say, I don't want any government handouts for people, that would make you a hypocrite. Again, there is a distinction to be made between somebody who owns a parcel of land and somebody who owns the ability to create food for the nation. That there is a distinction to be drawn up there. and that the means of production should not be held by private ownership. That the security of the nation, the ability to withhold food from the public, should not be decided upon by private owners. That should be something that the working class itself has a say in, and has the ability to control its own destiny and its own growth and evolution as a nation by being involved in the decision making about what food gets made, where it's distributed, how it's distributed, and likely no longer withholding food from people. This to me is my largest talking point. What I say the most, and the major reason I am a communist. Food and shelter should be free. It should be a universal truism that every single person should have access to food and should have access to shelter. No exceptions, no excuses, no little niggling debates. Everyone should have access to food and everyone should have access to shelter. Right, but you've been withheld from knowing that information, right? Food is diverse. How could the general public be an expert from leafy greens to beef? You teach them, right? Like we just put you through, 12 years of school? We didn't teach you a goddamn thing, did we? Like, what did we teach you? 12 years of school, what'd you learn? Right? You learned how to read, you learned how to write, you learned some math, right? So you've got those skills. Great. So you made it to grade 6. Congratulations. So what did we teach you grade 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? What was that for? What did you learn exactly? Isn't it a bit weird? Don't you think it's a bit strange that you weren't taught how to farm? That you weren't taught what plants exist around you? That you weren't taught about the natural world that exists around you? Don't you think that's a little odd? Don't you think that's a little strange? The idea of the capitalist society is certainly to specialize, to withhold knowledge from certain groups so that you can commodify it and then sell it. Certainly, right? It's certainly to take our kids and put them through an education system to teach them nothing important whatsoever, so that they can sell themselves into an education system in order to commodify knowledge itself and then sell that knowledge back to the public. Right? That's the way that's the method. That's the system. That's how it works. Right? If everybody knew how to farm and everybody was given access to farming and was allowed to farm, then you couldn't sell them farming. Right? Or if everybody was given access to the farming labor market and went and worked on farms and then in exchange had access to food with no monetary exchange whatsoever, well, then you can't generate profit from that if you're a banker, right? If you're a capital owner and your job is, and your task is, to get people to work for you for as little as possible, free if possible, which the history of capitalism shows happens quite a bit, get them to work for as cheaply as possible to produce as much as they possibly can so that you can sell it for profit. If that's your goal, right, then you want the smallest amount of people to understand how to do it as possible. You want to pay those people the smallest amount that you can possibly get away with. And any labor that comes to aid during periods of, let's say, harvest or something, you want to pay basically nothing. So that when you turn around and sell it, you can get access to the food yourself because you're the one that's the capital owner of it, right? But then you can take the surplus value of it and get profit for yourself. Well, if the workers were the ones that were actually laboring in the fields and then received the benefits of that labor, i.e. the food, and weren't withheld from the food market in the first place, well, then you can't sell them the food, can you? You can't profit from you withholding the food in the first place, can you? that instead of structuring our society so that everybody puts in the labor that's required in order to produce the food or maintain the shelter and then have access to the food and the shelter as payment for being involved in the labor of the food or the shelter, instead of doing that, we exist under a system of wage slavery. A capital system that says the capitalist is the one that owns the means of production, and that if you go and work for the capitalist, you don't get food, right? You don't get shelter, you get money, which then you can turn around and use to pay who? The capitalist for food and shelter. And if the capitalist is smart, as they have been many times throughout history, the wage they'll pay you is worth less than the food you need to buy. So then you have to take out debt. And who do you take a debt out from? Oh, is it the capitalist? It's the capitalist. So the whole thing is a scam from start to finish. That the capital owners want to pay you $0 to generate as much food or any other asset as possible to give to them so that they can turn around and sell it back to who? To you. So they are, by definition, in this process, a worthless middleman who contributes none of the labor, none of the value, not even the assets or the tools. They simply exist as a middleman in the process of the generation of the assets and the goods that we need to survive. They are worthless. We should get rid of them. They provide no value whatsoever. In fact, I make the argument that they provide negative value to us. We should be done away with them. People like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, here in Canada, David Thompson, the Irvings, Joseph Tsai, the Pattersons, Galen Weston. These people are worthless parasites who provide no value whatsoever to us, who siphon away the wealth that we generate while demanding that we work for them for nothing. We should seize the means of production. We should remove them from the decision-making process completely. And we should say food and shelter should be free. Everyone should chip in to the degree that it is required, which is not very much. It only takes something like 3 or 4% of the population to generate our food as it is. And everybody should have access to those resources. No questions asked, no excuses made. It's just how it is. And if somebody stands up and cries about it, we say to them, shut up. Too bad. Everyone gets food and shelter. Tough. Jahone says, letting the fire decide is a great example. Yeah, I think it's a good analogy. Is Canada in decline? The OECD says that Canada is the least developing nation in the G20. That of the developed nations, Canada is the one that is developing the slowest. We are like, none of the Western countries are currently in decline, right? That the recession hasn't full blown, but like, we are growing slower than we ever have. Recession is looming, and there are many sections of the country that are in recession. Have a good one, Mikhail. I kind of feel like the moving applications are difficult to Hong Kong, but still doable. Yeah, the Vietnamese government gives their people land, so even owning land is not necessarily a strictly capitalist thing. but you would have changed the monetary system too, especially here in Canada. And I'll tell you right now, I have a problem. Well, guys, I think I've come to the end. I'm a little over time. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just say the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.